Anybody feel the earthquake?
No.
No.
Did you?
No.
I've just had a message from Alexa. She's stuck in a Zoom meeting. She'll get there as soon as she can.
Okay, dear. Thank you.
Okay, and the live streaming is now going.
Okay, can we
we are
bring in
online.
Alice?
Oh no, she's sorry. Apologies. She's stuck in the waiting room, Zoom waiting room. Can you?
Oh, what is she?
She's usually Alexa.
I had to go back out, Kate, and then come back in
Okay.
for some reason.
I'll tell her to do that. Is that okay, Kim?
Did you lock the door when you came back out, Brian?
That was, I don't know, there are all these doors locked around me. I didn't know what was.
Mine went away for a minute too, but it just came back of its own volition.
Can we wait until we get Alexa through, because this is about
Yeah.
Okatapu.
I felt like Alice in Wonderland.
Kim, is it okay? She should be in the waiting room or coming back in.
I can't see her in the waiting room. I'm sorry.
Either can I. I'm going to try. Try again. I don't know how young people use those phones so fast, because either I've got very fat fingers, but I meant to say I cannot see you in the waiting room, and I said I cannot D you in the waiting room. Okay.
Councillor Wilson, we can't see Alexa in the waiting room. I just wonder if it's worth messaging her to make sure she's on today's link rather than the link from a previous day.
Okay, please make sure on today's calendar link.
Thank you.
Done.
That was an apology for Councillor Laws.
Yep, saw that. Thank you, dear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, unless she's on a different device and her name's coming up as someone else, we can't see Alexa there.
Who is 517244?
I'm not sure about that. It's a gentleman, but I'm not sure whether he's part of a different one of the morning presentations.
Okay.
So we might need to let him through to find that out, because I don't have details of that.
Well, I think that we might have to go on ahead, dear, rather than wait and find out and wait for Alexa to join us. I've texted her to say, please reapply.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I'll let Alistair Snow through now.
Here's Alistair. Thanks, Alistair. You've connected to audio. Good
morning.
Good morning. This is Marion Hobbs speaking, and this is the Otago Regional Council. And you have about 10 minutes to persuade us why we should pay you 120,000.
Easy.
But go for it.
Okay, thank you. John Glover was also supposed to join into the meeting. Is one
Is he 517244? Is that a number that you know?
No, let me just check quickly.
Councillor Hobbs, shall we put this person through?
Yeah, just see if it is John, because he's in
if you look up, you can see his face.
He's in Glenorchy, so he may just be dialing in.
Alistair, there's a person grinning at you online. Is that him there?
I can't see him.
He was there a minute ago too.
Okay, he might haven't. Look, I will just get going if.
Okay, Deb. All right.
No, I don't see John anywhere in there. So there's a few people in here. I'll just get going anyway, and hopefully he can join. The Wakatipu TMA has been formed really to assist in the transportation congestion issues that the region's holding at the moment. So it's a community response, I guess, to, well, the need for the need to address the congestion issue is the purpose for the TMA, and I think that's well understood. The region here has been experiencing quite a lot of negative impacts, both socially, environmentally, and commercially with that. And we've seen the formation of the Wakatipu Way to Go in response from central and region and the local governments as well in response to that. So the TMA is a community response to that. We've been we've been supported by the Chamber of Commerce, Shaping Our Future, and Innovation Queenstown. So they're all organisations that are supporting our effort. So I guess that's the need. And like I've said, the TMA has been formed by individuals. So we've got a governance group in place. I'm flipping around here a bit.
All right.
So really to address those issues, we're seeking some seed capital to help us get a management team in place to support those initiatives. The purpose is around it being a self-financing, non-for-profit, standalone group to address the 40% mode shift that the Way to Go organisation is trying to achieve. We have a primary goal of providing education, encouragement, communication and promotion to affect that 40% mode shift. And we have a secondary focus around representing the users in this region around that planning, design and implementation part of the engineering solution that Way to Go are going to be providing. So we're more of the softer part of the response to that investment, to our transportation requirements or the congestion requirements. So the idea is that it is community led. The IP associated, so the IP and the energy is owned with this community. I think it's easy for local government and central government to perhaps outsource a lot of these requirements, but we think if we can hold that IP, that collective knowledge around how we deal with those softer issues to affect the mode shift, we think that's got to be a better solution. Yeah, so that's the thinking behind it. How do we affect that behavioural change from our community to support the mode shift?
Okay,
so that's us in a nutshell.
Some questions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you really, if I heard you say that this was seeding money, so you're not expecting to ask for $120,000 next year?
No, the idea is that it will be self-funding. So we want to get a general manager in place to get the business, get it operating and get it up and running. The purpose is that we already have a relationship with the Wakatipu Way to Go team, with Sean Hubbard and co. The idea, and with Peter Hansby at QLDC, and they are quite supportive to the initiatives.
Yep.
And
So it's a one-off.
So the concept, it's a one-off payment. It's us to get our business up and running, and we'll source funding from then on in through the capital projects, or as the Way to Go initiatives progress, then we will follow in behind that around the behavioural change piece, and the funding will come from those identified projects or from sponsorships from other areas. Yes, so this is just a one-off to get the thing moving.
Okay, when you talk about dealing with softer issues, I'll stop asking questions in a minute, people.
No, that's fine.
Keep things going. Talking about dealing with softer issues, in a sense, you're seeing Way to Go as the kinds of ones who make the hard decisions, and you're trying to be the interface with the public to persuade them that different forms of public transport are needed. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's a 40% mode shift required. The way to go is to build the hard infrastructure to make it work. But unless we affect behavioural change, it's just not going to be effective. So the concept is that this organisation will assist in that softer stuff. So it's about promotion, communication, coordination, and education. So that's our remit.
So you're trying to get people onto the buses, the ferries, and onto active, what do you call it? Active transport.
Active transport, public transport and active transport. And I think it's a little bit more than that. It's about collecting data and understanding. It's about getting organisations together to see how they can manage the transportation better as well. So
Okay.
it's that, yeah.
Kate, you've got your hands up for a question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to check, people come along and ask for 120,000 or whatever, and just understanding who you think is going to pay for that. Is that a targeted rate from the Queenstown Lakes District area wide, or just the Wakatipu area, or are you expecting this to be a general rate? Because I can imagine that there are a number of councils, and we're looking at regional transport happening, and public transport happening Otago wide potentially, in the new regional passenger transport plan. And so I just want to make sure that we're not opening up ourselves to something that everyone may want, and not be funded. So yeah, just how are you expecting this when you're asking for 120,000? Is it from your local ratepayers?
Look, I think the TMA as an entity is new to New Zealand, so I think how it transforms is something that we've all got to learn going forward. I'm going to get to answering your question.
Yeah, that's fine.
So how it transpires and how it grows and how it evolves is something that we've all got to learn. So I think we've got to work through it together. Yes, I think all regions probably do have a need for a community-led type transportation management organisation. So yes, I'd like to think that this concept will become more prevalent across New Zealand and across our cities and communities. So I'm not an expert in how ratings operate, but I guess there are others that will figure out if they do deem it worthwhile or do see the value in it, then it can be targeted, I guess. Look, it's a one-off, so I don't see this as an annual requirement. So, and I think the funding will probably come in the future will come out of capital funds or specific projects that the communities or councils want.
Okay.
So the answer is I don't like to directly answer that.
No, I can understand it. Can I just understand capital funds usually are for hard infrastructure? You just explained to our chair that you're talking about soft action. So I'm just yeah.
Look, it's not clear to me because it is new. So it's not clear to me where the funding's coming from. But without the soft stuff, the hard stuff won't work, or the hard stuff won't be effective, and they won't get the benefits that they require from it. We can build motorways and bridges, but we can build better roads and put in better bus terminals and what have you. But unless we convince tourists and our locals to use them, we don't get the full benefit from it.
Just before I call on Hilary, welcome John, who's from Wakatipu, who you've come and gone, and also welcome Alexa, who's joined us. Hilary, you had your hand up.
My question is really just that up until you were saying what you've been saying this morning, I had understood that it was the role of somewhere between a combination of us and us being ORC and Queenstown Lakes to be doing this sort of job. Would they then not be doing that? We have, when things are presented to us, part of what's presented to us often is, and we need to educate the public and we need to get them to understand why what we're offering is a jolly good thing, public transport wise and things. Are we then replicating something they are or should be doing already, or do they just get out of that role?
Oh, look, I don't think there's anything getting out. I think it's all of us having to contribute in different ways. The TMA structure has been used quite successfully internationally and in other tourist regions. So I just think it's another mechanism to make sure that, you know, it is effective. It's just and so I think it's a shared responsibility, and I think that's what Way to Go is about. Although Way to Go is more focused on infrastructure. So yeah.
You just said something there, Alistair. You said TMAs are in other tourist places.
Yes.
Can you just answer me that?
Yeah, well, that, you know, it is, I mean, one of the reasons why it was suggested here with the chamber was that, you know, in other regions around the world and other tourist locations, they have these types of organisations.
Okay.
You know, like Aspen and so forth, where they support the regional councils.
Thank you.
I think it's probably an opportunity, because it's community led, it's an opportunity to get perhaps closer to community organisations and businesses as well. It's about combining the two.
Thank you. Alexa.
Kia ora, and thank you, Alistair. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I was in the waiting room, but I was able to watch your presentation on YouTube, which was quite awesome. But I just wanted, I think that this idea is quite new to New Zealand. And basically, I think that the councils have always undertaken this work themselves. And where you're going is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to bring business and community, but almost actually business, in behind a mode shift drive, and that's coming from the assumption that putting the infrastructure in place for that drive is the job of the councils, and that's what they do and they're good at it, but maybe they're not so good at actually ensuring that people use them, given it's not a regulatory space.
Yeah, I think that is correct, and I think you've got to recognise the uniqueness of Queenstown. You know, a large portion of our daily population are tourists, and we have lots of commercial operations. You know, the transport movements are increased by moving those tourists around to the different operations. That's not coordinated. Each organisation's doing their own thing with their own buses. You know, early in the morning, they're shipping staff out, and then during the day, they're moving their tourists or their clients around. And at the end of the day, you know, there's no coordination behind that, or no education about how that could be done better. So yeah, you're quite right. It's unique.
That is something that that we need a TMA, because that is not easily managed within the remits of the councils. Would that be fair as well?
Yeah, I think I think there's potential there to do it better.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, one last question from me. Is 120,000 cast in stone?
Look, no, it's not. We need to get this up and running. We will utilise any funding we can get. If you're going to offer me more, yes, we'll take it.
No,
look, we've also applied to QLDC for a similar funding, so we'll, you know, hopefully, you know, between the two, we'll get sufficient funding so we can make a difference, and we can give this a good crack at being successful. We just need to get that general management capability on board to get this thing going.
Okay, are there any more questions for Alistair or for John? There being none, can I thank you both for coming on and for explaining something that is quite different, and we'll have to do quite a lot of thinking and arguing about this.
Hey, look, thank you for your support, thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you,
Deb. Okay, people, we're going to welcome on somebody from Tracks and Trails. What is her name? Kate. Are you a member of Tracks and Trails?
No, look, I'll just stand out. I'm part of the Otago Central Rail Trail and the Dunedin Tunnels Trails Trust, which are both referenced in the submission. And sorry, I think that precludes me. I'll listen in, but I won't be actively taking part.
Please,
I
please
just
do, because
potential conflict.
when I was reading this last night, I thought, we have somebody who knows this stuff backwards on it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is number 58. People. Sorry, dear person who's arrived. The chairperson.
Sarah Davies. Nitus.
Right. Oh. Sometimes here we are. Okay, and this is Sarah, is it? Thank you, Sarah. All right, Sarah, this is the council and in all its glory. And we're here to listen to you for about 10 minutes, and then we'll, ask you questions. Sort of explain your proposition to us, what it is that you'd like us to do.
Good morning, Chair, councillors. Is there senior staff or it's just the councillors? It's the councillors.
Sarah's listening, the CE is listening.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity to provide comment on your annual plan. And we appreciate times have not been easy over recent months. And we're grateful for the effort you've undertaken to organise these meetings. I had the pleasure of meeting a few of you over the campaign trail last year, and I'd quickly like to congratulate you all on your election to the Regional Council. It's definitely gutted to miss out on the Dunedin City Council, but I've since realised there are a lot of ways that I can try and make a difference. So here I am. In our submission today, I'd firstly like to provide an introduction to our group. Secondly, we'll raise the Otago Regional Land Transport Plan and the development of tracks and trails across our fabulous city. And thirdly, we'd like to ask that you consider two key trails and how they relate to the long-term goal of the Land Transport Plan. So our group, we're a group hopefully soon to be formalised as a trust, who believe the opportunity exists to bring together diverse stakeholders across the city to create an ambitious shared vision for a network of connected world-class tracks and trails. We believe such a vision will contribute to sustainable tourism, road safety, mode shift, and the well-being of our residents. We do not want to undermine the foundation of work underway in the regional or city councils, nor do we want to undermine the foundation of work underway by a lot of communities, clubs and trusts. And believe me, there are a lot of work being undertaken by communities, clubs and trusts in this tracks and trails space. We're thinking about a complete tracks and trails network. We're considering urban cycleways, walking and running tracks, recreational cycleways, and those that are shared paths. So we'd like to see the big picture, looking at all existing tracks and trails across Dunedin City. And from there, working with stakeholders, we'd like to create a shared vision for a network into the future. A network of overlays, if you like, a network where urban commuter cycleways are not only connected to each other, but they're connected to key recreational cycleways and shared paths. A network that includes at least one great ride, showcasing our beautiful scenery, our history and wildlife. A network where public transport routes connect with walking and cycling tracks. A network that links Dunedin trails, both commuter and recreational, to neighbouring towns, to other great rides, and to the National Trail. A network that's developed by locals and enhanced by locals. So today we're asking that councillors support the development of a shared vision for tracks and trails that are connected, of world class, across Dunedin City. So that's our first request. Looking at this vision and how it relates to the Land Transport Plan, we appreciate some of these trails are not necessarily covered by the Land Transport Plan, but we note that as well as the road network, the plan provides for an extensive off-road cycle network, which is agreed to contribute to road safety and economic growth and development. Reading the document, we see across both the Otago and Southland land transport plans, this off-road cycle network currently includes around 500 kilometres of official trails, including several great rides. Locally, the Otago Central Rail Trail, onto the Alps to Ocean Cycle Trail, around the mountain, Clutha Gold Trail and the Clutha Gold Extension, the Roxburgh Gorge Trail and the Queenstown Trail. There currently are not any connecting trails to the heart of Dunedin City, and nor to the Dunedin International Airport. And we believe this offers a real opportunity. With connections, mode choice, road safety and economic growth being key considerations of the land transport plan, we'd like to suggest that there are two trails that are integral to both the land transport plan and to our vision of a world-class network of connected tracks and trails. A trail to the south of the city, connecting Dunedin with the Clutha Gold Extension Trail at Waihola and onto the trails of Central Otago, and a trail to the north of the city, connecting with Oamaru and the Alps to Ocean Trail. So our second request today is that you consider collaborating with our group on the development of a shared vision and key trails of this connected network. Further on these two key trails, there is work being undertaken in this space. It's been driven by local groups and trusts in their respective communities. There's a feasibility study on the Northern Connection now sitting with the DCC, and a feasibility on the Southern Trail soon to commence. So this brings me to our final request for today. Stop banks are used successfully around the country for cycleways and shared paths. In Otorohanga most recently, and in Canterbury most locally. We request councillors permit the inclusion of the stop banks of the Silver Stream and Tory River in a feasibility study for an off-road trail as an option for the Southern Trail, connecting Dunedin to Waihola and beyond. So in summary, we think this is the right time to be looking at the cycling network of the Regional Land Transport Plan. If we look at the effects of COVID-19, I'm sure there's never been more people out and about in their sneakers or on their bikes. The value of tracks and trails development aligns directly with the strategic direction of the Land Transport Plan across our region. Diverse local stakeholders are interested and supportive. Next year is your consultation year as far as the Land Transport Plan goes. Currently, government ministries and agencies appear very interested in cycleways, and the term shovel ready is thrown around as much as Zoom meetings these days. And there are many case studies detailing the economic benefits of cycleways in promoting sustainable tourism. So we wish to collaborate with you, the Regional Council and other stakeholders to develop an ambitious shared vision for a complete network of connected tracks and trails across the greater Dunedin area. We believe the Land Transport Plan should include two key shared paths or cycleways, one to the north of Dunedin and one to the south of Dunedin. And we'd like to see the stop banks of the Silver Stream and the Tory Rivers available for inclusion in a feasibility study for an off-road trail to the south, connecting Dunedin to Waihola and the Clutha Gold Extension Trail. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Okay, I can't see any hands up as yet, but there will be. I'm just puzzled, and I know that I'm a very minor cyclist, but how the hell do I get over the hills on either side of Dunedin to get out?
Well, there's a local group that is working on part of that southern extension, and they're quite far down the track as far as it's called the Dunedin Tunnels Trail.
Okay, I can understand that one. The north, where I live.
And I'm not familiar with the details of the feasibility, but I think that's where those experts come into it and they consider all of that. They look at the possible routes and who is going to use it and why they're going to use it. And I also think the likes of electric bikes provide greater options in that space.
Yeah, that's still quite high. I'm just looking at it right now, but never mind it. I can see Brian's hand up. And then Alexa.
Yeah, I suspect that's why they invented the term engineers. You know, like, for example, so it's about identifying a trail that gradually gets to a point. So, for example, to the north, it might be via the Leith. There's already a network through that way, and not necessarily going up the hill from Port Chalmers. Thank you, Sarah. Look, this is marvellous, and I think not only the council needs to get behind it, but the community. Your connection from the south, your connection to the north, and I think that needs to happen, and I think that will happen. I also think we've got so much work to do in terms of a network around Dunedin. In fact, I got emailed last night myself personally about access through some of my land. So, like, public access through public land is one thing, and then access through private land. And like, I'm currently almost finished the Tararoa Trail to the south, and on the trail, it's, you know, there's a common standard normally, not so much in the south. The south is actually the most disappointing part in terms of promotion, ease of access, all this type of thing. And it needs to be made sexy so that young people, old people get out there and become healthy and enjoy it. And it's really an exciting field. And it's something that will last the test of time. You know, like we're setting a foundation up that our children will look back and say, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Brian. Alexa.
I'd like to thank you too, Sarah. It's amazing work, and it's great to see it all together like this. And as you already know, I'm really supportive of these, and I think we do need to figure out how we get them in place, because until we do, we keep locking up people into cars, really. And I'm not worried about the hills, Marion. I've seen us get all over our hills here in Queenstown with no problem whatsoever. And when people used to say to me, well, you know, it's all very well to talk about cycling in Amsterdam, but it's flat there. If you ever cycled in Amsterdam, they have the wind that comes through at 100 million miles an hour, makes you feel like you're going up a 30-degree slope. So, you know, it's really, we can design, and as Brian pointed out, the engineers, there's international standards on how you design these trails to get, I think it's a 1 in 10 pitch, and you can do that pretty much anywhere with switchbacks and so on. So I'm really not worried about that. What I think that a lot of these things miss, and you didn't miss, Sarah, but I just want to pick it up just so that nobody else misses it, is that there's a big tourism part of this, but there's also a huge connection part of small communities. And when you can connect small communities with safe ways to get around, particularly for people that can't drive, younger people and older people can get on bikes often after they can finish, you know, after they can't drive anymore. They can actually often still bike as long as they've biked all their lives. If they've stopped it, you know, for long periods, it gets very difficult. But there's times that, you know, there's plenty of people who can't see well enough or whatever to drive because it's too fast for them, but they can do it on a bike. And I know some of those, if anybody wants those examples. Anyway, so there we go. But I really, really love this, and I don't know how we fund these things properly yet in a way that's acceptable to all sorts of other people when it doesn't seem cost effective to start with. And this means that we have to look well into the future and analyze the cost benefits from a very futuristic perspective, so we understand the embodied carbons, the different things that are coming into play, the lifestyle advantages, the advantages of having 14 and 15-year-olds getting themselves about, etc. But thank you very much for your presentation. Good luck and crack on. Cheers.
Is there anything further you'd like to say to us, Sarah?
No, just to highlight that it is definitely a 10 to 15 year plan. I think that we've got to take the time to get these connections right in the first place, and then like it isn't something that we're going to get the funding for in the immediate future. But I think if we do look to that future and start building on those blocks on an annual basis, then we'll be on the right track.
Well, in a way, you're in a fortunate time talking to the ORC, because the two people who are leading out our work on transport are both great cyclists. Okay. And so it's really good to know, and who are quite passionate about it. So thank you very much for coming in today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Darling, the next person we have is School Strike for Climate Change coming in, and it's number 57. She's nearly there. She's just connecting to audio.
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you.
You can hear me, right?
Oh, I have to turn up my volume.
I'm sure you have a name, though. Yes, J.A. Thea. Are you J.A. Thea?
I am J.A. Thea. That is right.
Have you got anything other than J.A.?
I do have something other than J.A. So my first name's Yana. I just tend to go by my
J.A.
initials more than my first name.
All right.
Yes.
I will do that, dearest. Okay, J.A., you've got about 10 minutes to put your case to us, and then after that we'll ask some questions for about 5 minutes. Thank you for waiting for us. And this is the council in all its glory.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So we support a lot of the guiding principles behind your plan, like encouraging better urban environments and looking after our plants and wildlife and taking steps against climate change. But in places we think that more urgent action must be taken. I was recently called out kind of something about the impatience of the young at the ennui of the old. But the way I see it is that the young are not the only people being impatient. The earth itself is impatient, and it's not impatient without cause. We've had decades to fix our problems and to adapt to more ethical and sustainable means, and we've continually not met the requirements, especially when it comes to climate change. It's a human pattern to unrealistically elongate timelines and, I don't know, diminish urgency when doing so serves the immediate economic future. And so while impatience is a thing that is typically not to be admired, I don't really mind being called impatient here. The reality is that even once humans are gone, the earth will continue to exist in some form or another. But I don't really want our behaviors or our resistance to change to be what makes future generations, you know, my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, to live in a world with air that burns and where they don't want to go outside because it's too hot and they fear that. I'm someone who really likes the outdoors. So beyond me not wanting this kind of out of a novel future for human generations, we also have to take into account that our behaviors and our lifestyles and the way that we govern affect not only humans health-wise and otherwise, but also the rest of the world. So we have to, I don't know, acknowledge the responsibility that comes with such power that we've taken, and we need to act accordingly. Our own health has been affected by like our carbon emissions. So I think the statistic is something about 700,000 New Zealand citizens have been diagnosed with a respiratory disease. Of those 700,000, a third are children, except less than a quarter of our population totally is under 18. So my generation, the young people of our world and therefore our future, are being greatly affected by our CO2 emissions and by the decisions that are being made on a systemic level. Beyond that, beyond the changes that we can see and that we live with, like with increased smog over cities and, you know, watching the steadily rising little red line, which is the temperatures of our world that have increased about a degree, almost a degree Celsius in the past 40 years and over twice that of the poles. We're also affecting worlds that we don't see and that we don't spend so much time in, including like coral reefs would be a prime example. I think they cover less than 0.1% of our ocean's area, but they provide a quarter of our ocean's life, and huge expanses of them are dying due to being bleached from high temperatures, from the warming climate, and from our carbon emissions. And it's quite heartbreaking, and it might not seem entirely relevant to the Otago Regional Council because we're not tropical and we don't have a whole lot of coral reefs around. But everything is interconnected, and the decisions being made here affect decisions being made later on, and decisions being made across the world, and across the decisions being made here affect realities that are far from ours and that are ours. How influential people are over the well-being of almost all life on Earth is important to take note. So we need to, in making decisions, take into account life, ours, plants, animals, but also life as a concept. We've made ourselves, humanity, the linchpin for the survival of most species. And therefore, climate change cannot only be a consideration in everything we do, which is what you say under the header of, I think it's climate change for a safe and resilient future. As dramatic as it sounds, it's not inaccurate to say that without a livable climate, all facets of life are moot. Our finances won't matter when we aren't around to care about them. We're glad that you acknowledge climate change, and we're glad that you are encouraging learning and educating about climate change. And I think that's one of humanity's great strengths, to share information and build off that. And I think now it's a time to really take that the next step and move into actions. And we need to devise ways not only to think about how to survive once climate change happens, because to do that, to think that way is thinking that climate change is an isolated instance, when it's more a overarching, a longer problem. It's chronic rather than acute. It takes place over a long period of time. I mean, we've been talking about the greenhouse effect since the 1800s, and it lacks in some amount of shock value, but it's very dire. And we can't really think about it, what's happening after it. There won't be an aftermath. It's just a continual escalation of events that are caused by climate change, and there are a number of catastrophes within it, but it in itself is a longer thing. So we need to work to prevent it and to quell it, and not to just work with how are we going to survive in this thing, because it is stoppable and it is fixable. We just need to actually care, and we need to be dedicated to it, and we need to change our lives on a systemic level in order to encourage that level of change needed. I think that's kind of the crux of our response, because through climate change we can address the various different subcategories within your plan. Public transport, we support you encouraging public transport, because that too is on a sliding scale of, over here you've got everybody in their own individual cars, and you've got carpooling, and of course you have walking and bicycling, but you need means to do that. You need tracks and the ability. And then you've got buses, and then over here you've got sustainable trains. Of course, the last one, the sustainable trains, would be the ideal, and we would like you to explore further in that direction as well, although we acknowledge that buses and public transportation as a whole is far better than everybody driving in their own little metal bubbles, pardon the pandemic pun. So if COVID-19 has shown us anything, it's that when we declare something an emergency and treat it as such, we really get stuff done. So we know that there are tolls to be paid in becoming sustainable, and we may be school-aged children, but we're not young enough to think that it's going to be a cakewalk to fix these problems and to make the world livable and breathable in a sustainable manner. However, we're pragmatic and life-loving enough to think that the uphill battle is far more than worth it. And so in putting the climate crisis first, we would be protecting the wildlife of plants and of animals, and we would be I don't know, the bottom line really is the climate crisis, and it needs to be treated as such, because without that being addressed, everything else that's addressed, the value is limited, because the climate crisis is kind of the pivotal thing in determining the future. And there's enough work to be done that we are unable to justify not working towards it. I think that's about it for me.
J.A., can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if we've been staring at you with concentrated faces, as every time now and then you come to an end of a sentence and there's a gap, and it's not you. No, it's not you, dear. It's the machinery. So if we've been looking at you very puzzled, that's why. It's just the transmission isn't all that great. Have we got any? Oh well, I can't see any hands up for questions, so I've got one question to ask you. I thought I heard you put the thing mitigation versus adaptation into a way of explaining it. Was that what you were saying when you were saying it's not enough to prepare for what's going to happen, but we also have to prepare to stop it? Was that what you were saying in that sort of sense?
That is essentially what I was saying. We think it's really important to not just work with how we're going to live in a warmer or climate, or a position where there are more devastating weather patterns, but we need to work to prevent that, because it's possible. We need the concentration there, and it's urgent and it's dire.
Are there any questions? Alexa and then Gretchen, thank you, and then Brian.
Apologies, I couldn't find the raise my hand button quick enough. Thank you very much, J.A., for your presentation and for keeping this front of mind. And as I've found over many, many, many years in this space, that it is extremely difficult to convince the world to take action on an impending problem when the economic advantages of not taking that action are right in front of them. So, and that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance between taking action that's expensive now but cheap later, or the other way around, is really difficult to get happening. And all I can say to you is to please keep going, keep the pressure on, pedal to the metal. If I can help in any way, please be in touch. I do work every decision I make as in my work in several places is grounded clearly in the kaupapa of thinking about climate change and the impending doom that I know is coming and other people haven't managed to think is not. I don't know. But, and I don't know if you have some advice for me. I'd like it. I've been a bit of a failure in this position in the past, clearly, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are.
Thank you, Alexa. Gretchen, question, and then Brian.
I just want to see if she's got any advice for me, please.
Oh, sorry, love.
Marion,
I'm sorry.
just in case she does.
I don't know. I think it's fairly easy to become demoralized, especially as our need for instant gratification is increasing with our technology and with our technological advancements. So just a perpetual fighting of that, I guess, and advocating for, I don't know, what you believe in and what you think needs to happen. I do think that as the crisis continues to escalate, my hope is that at some point it'll get drastic enough that people will say, hey, this is actually not okay. In my mind, we've already reached that point, but I'll continue advocating for that, and we'll see how many people can agree.
Thank you, Gretchen,
Thank you.
Followed by Brian, followed by Kevin.
Thank you very much for a very coherent submission and for your voice in this. I know that you've put in a whole lot of work and you've actually been really successful in this space. Just you're looking around at us around the table and our demographics as a council, possibly compared with our community's demographics, particularly Dunedin actually, and probably Queenstown as well, with quite a young population. And we always have a challenge of communicating well and presenting the views of our whole community. And the youth's a really, really important part of that. You've been doing a great job, so thank you for that. But wondering if you've come to us and made a submission, but is there a way that we can work together better and maybe have involvement from the likes of yourself in local government? Is that something that you would like to foster, or is it better for you to be working outside? How can we better portray some of the issues that you've been presenting to us? Could we work together somehow?
I mean, I believe so. I think a balance between working within and working without would be the strongest way to go about it. I think having youth voices in decisions that are being made now are really important because the youth are the people who we're going to take leadership, I guess, and the land and the earth is going to fall under our guardianship sooner or later. And so having kind of a cohesive and coherent connection between the two, I think is really important, so that we're not left then with this kind of broken up passing along, but it flows a little bit better. So that is something that we'd be interested in, and something that I personally would be interested in as well.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Brian.
No, thank you. It's already been said. Thank you.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, morning, Joe. Thanks for your presentation. Just a couple of things. We had an earlier submitted called the Wise Response Society, and one thing that they had said to us, which I thought was really vital, was that we should be thinking globally, but actually acting locally. And so I just wonder what your group is. And they also come up with a method around that to get us going, was some carbon accounting tools. And so I'm just wondering what your group has been doing along that lines, and helping youth understand their own carbon footprint and how they could reduce it.
So we do work in advocating with students and trying to educate as a whole. However, our main focus really is on addressing the problems within the system rather than the problems within the society, because the reality is that very few people can actually behave in sustainable means within the rubric that we have, within the construct of our society, and within the way that our system is formulated. So our main focus is on adjusting that to make individual choices easier, and to improve the condition on a broader level. Individually, while there is stuff that individuals can do, it's more privileged, I guess, in a way. And so we work against the stigma of at a strike, oh well, how did you get to the strike? Did you drive? If there aren't systems in place to be sustainable, people won't be sustainable. So we're more for making the systems in place, building systems within which societies can be sustainable.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
There being no more questions that I can see, can I thank you very much, JA, for coming on? And I'm sorry if we're frowning a lot of time. It's not what you're saying. We're just waiting for the words to catch up. All right.
I'm sorry for my poor connection.
It's okay, dear. Whereabouts are you living? Are you in Dunedin, or are you in another part?
Yes, I am Dunedin.
Dunedin. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
People, we're about to take three things together. Now, Peter Darden is going to come on, and he's both Bus Users Support Group, New Zealand Tramways Union, and himself. And so he's going to probably coalesce them all together. So when Peter comes on, I've lost him. Jasmine, where's Peter?
Kia ora. He was there a minute ago. I'm not sure why he has popped off again. I see that the presenter after him is currently there. So I don't know whether you want to wait a few minutes for Peter or whether we move on and have him join us again.
Should we give him just 1 minute? And
I'm
then
just giving
and then
Peter a
take-
call now.
Yep.
Okay.
I've lost him.
Peter's just joining us now.
Thank you, dear. Peter, are you there? No. Ah, here he comes. I can see it. Peter, good. Ah. Welcome, Peter. Sorry that we kept you waiting.
Yes, thank you. And actually, I kept you waiting too. I was enjoying the previous submitter, JA's answers to your questions so much that I kept flipping over to YouTube, but whenever I did that, my device would close down Zoom. So yeah, that's...
Okay. Peter, you've got 3 submissions, and I think for people that are 21, 20 and 19, do you want to treat them as a whole or treat them separately?
I'll treat them separately, but I think it might be more convenient for question time to be done as a whole, and I think that could work quite well. So if you like, I'll begin with my personal submission, and then I'll do the Tramways Union submission, and then the Bus Users Group submission.
Thank you, Jim. Off you go. And then at the end of those 3, you'll tell us, and then we'll open up for questions.
And then let's have questions, yeah, because that way some of the questions could pertain. So I'll just do my first one, which is actually really that I don't have one. I don't. My personal submission was very brief, but I simply ticked the box to reserve the right to come and speak to it. But I don't think there's really much I need to add. It was a perfunctory ticking the boxes, my personal submission. But before I introduce my second 2 submissions, I just want to point out that I've been asked by these other 2 groups to represent them because of what they perceive as my expertise in the field of bus service. But just please be aware that both organisations, each organisation is capable of holding a view that is contrary to the other organisation, and that's all I need to say about that. So let's proceed with the Tramways Union submission. So the Tramways Union wants to express its deep gratitude for the draft annual plan's inclusion of funding of living wages for bus drivers, and that will be of great help in Dunedin and Queenstown. But it's a very hollow victory, I feel, and we don't take very much comfort in our wider comrades in all of the industries that are covered by regional council contracts none of the others have been included, as far as I can tell, in this provision. And so we, as a union, we stand in solidarity with the wallaby wrestlers and the bunny bashers and the riverbank reinforcers who also work for the regional council. And our petition to the council on behalf of all unions in Otago was very clear that we wanted the regional council to fund and require its contractors to pay the living wage to all of its contractors' staff. It's very nice to have this for bus drivers, but that is leaving out a lot of our other comrades and other unions and other workers. And so this is quite disappointing. And so I do urge you to reconsider your annual plan budget and get your staff to review the funding that would be required to include all contractor staff in all industries, not just bus drivers. And then, of course, finally, I'd also point out that there doesn't appear to be any provision for bus cleaners, bus mechanics, the bus administration office staff, who are also very important figures in our industry, and we wouldn't wish to see them being thrown under a bus, perhaps being driven by one of us, metaphorically speaking, of course. And finally, just a brief note, a brief verbal note. This wasn't part of our submission, but I just want to bring to attention the Employment Relations Act that gave all workers in New Zealand the right to a 10-minute break approximately every couple of hours and a 30-minute break approximately every 4 hours. This has been withheld from bus drivers over an extended period, with the last deadline was passed recently on the 6th of this month, 6th of May, because it was deemed that bus drivers were too important to have their work disrupted by introduction of this new law. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is that really the introduction of this, it's something that our employer appears quite happy to do, to give us these times, but they're rather constrained in doing so by the regional council's timetable. So we do seek more cooperation and more effort on the part of the regional council to adapt the bus timetable so that drivers can enjoy the right that is given to them in law for these rest breaks. And I don't want to, I do need to remind you that, rest and the prevention of fatigue are very important in the bus industry, important in all industries, but particularly in the bus industry due to the responsibility we have to our passengers.
Are you still with us?
Yes, the last thing is the responsibility we have to our passengers. Did you hear that bit? Oh dear.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not quite sure what to do in this situation.
Sorry, what is the situation, Peter?
The situation where you can't hear what I'm saying.
Yes, we can hear what you're saying.
Oh, good, good. No, I have, I here endeth the verbal submission.
Right. I've lost you completely. No, I haven't. You've moved. Peter, that's a submission on part of the Tramways Union. What about the one from Ōtepoti users?
So the bus users support group Ōtepoti Dunedin, previously known as Bus Go Dunedin, but we found that it was too confusing with the similar name of a local bus company. Now the submission of the bus users group is that we look forward to some more work being done on bus fares. This is the biggest contribution we think that the current annual plan could make, and we've given a very detailed description of how we think bus fares could be modified in the least instance. Generally speaking, that submission is based on best practice around New Zealand, such as giving a discount to all community service card holders. And but of course, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't be very happy if there were much more radical modifications to the fare system, such as free buses like we have at the moment. But yeah, it was our rock bottom position. And really what we would like is the opportunity to sort of workshop some ideas with council staff at the drafting stage of any adjustment to the fare system. Because previously we've only ever been able to react to previous council proposals, but we feel that we have established enough of, we flatter ourselves that we're sort of stakeholders now in the public transport service. And we've done a lot of effort to engage with the public and develop a public debate on public transport. And so we would rather like to be considered at the drafting level of things like the upcoming review of the regional public transport plan. And that's basically the rest of that submission. But I do want to bring to all of your attention the submission by Community Councillor Alistair Morrison of the Waikouaiti Coast Community Board, where it was reported in the media in the Otago Daily Times that the people up that part of Greater Dunedin feel that their bus service is inadequate. And so I wanted to draw your attention to the to this document here, the 2014 Regional Public Transport Plan. And it might well be the case that the reason that the bus service up there is seen as inadequate is that it's not compliant with this plan. Now, let me show you the relevant page. You might not see it.
Just give us a reference.
For the, yeah, all right, so page 58, table 5.1 of the 2014 Regional Public Transport Plan. And for the Northern Service, which means the #1 bus to Palmerston, it currently it says the initial weekday frequency for this plan is that it runs approximately every 240 minutes, which that means every 4 hours. And that this is to be improved on weekdays to run every 120 minutes. And so now my mum would say, you're not allowed a new public transport plan until you've used up the old one. She applied that to jars of peanut butter and boxes of ice cream. I'm sure she would apply it to public transport plans. So really, if you're thinking of getting a nice new public transport plan, how about implementing your old one first? And I make that comment in support of the people up in Palmerston and Waikouaiti area. They are right to point out the shortcomings of their bus service. It seems to have been an oversight that, while it's understood for good reasons that you would phase in a gradual improvement to a service, the gradual improvement simply didn't happen, possibly by oversight. You know, we've all been very busy lately, and you know, that's something that ought to be done. I think there's another several years to run on that contract, but have a word with the contractor. They might be quite willing and able to put on more buses, you know, at a negotiated price.
Have you finished it or not?
I think that is the here end of the bus users submission, yes.
Thank you, Peter. Peter, I'll just open up the questions. I've just got one. When I looked at the bus users one, you went through, just about made me go cross-eyed, all the different versions of people getting concessions, okay, at different times. Just tell me what you'd think. What if everyone paid $2, regardless of length of trip, except probably out of Dunedin or Dunedin and Mosgiel, and took away all the concessions? Would that make things simpler for people?
Well, it would make the system easier to understand, but I would put it to you that, in fact, with a new, very high technology system that's just about to be introduced, with the e-card, that in fact you needn't be bewildered or bedazzled by the possibility of multiple different concessions. And I mean, I take your point. It does look good on the face of it, the idea of a simple single fare, but and I wouldn't want to speak too negatively about that. But yeah, don't let the concept of multiple array of concessions put you off, because yeah, the new computer system will handle that very adequately. And now getting back to sort of first year economics at university, you know, there's this trick called making everybody pay what they're happy to pay. And a business that does that makes more money than a business that has a single set price, because you know, with a single price, you sort of, the people who can't afford it won't buy it, will buy it, but the people who could afford to pay a bit more don't have to pay a bit more, but they buy it anyway. And yeah, any supermarket, they have, you know, they got Budget and they got Pam's and then they've got you know, Watties, all sitting on the same shelf. They've got the same contents, but they're all different prices. It's an old trick, and you will make more money, and more money is what our bus service needs.
Okay.
And as a passenger advocate, I don't step back from the concept of the bus service making more money, because if you have more money, you can spend it on all sorts of extra goodies like more frequent bus services or more comfortable buses or better bus shelters.
Thank you, Peter. Michael, Tika. Michael.
Peter, thank you for everything you've said. Have you driven the Palmerston route yourself?
Oh, not for a few years. It's operated by a different bus company than my employer. But I did it several years back when my employer operated it, yes.
Do you have a view on the coastal alternative route? The one through Seacliff?
Well, in fact, back in my day, it did actually go that way to some extent. Oh no, sorry, no, I'm quite incorrect. No, we used to duck into Karitane and then back out again to Cherry Farm over the Kilmog, didn't we? So no, in fact, I believe it does the same now. Yes, I have often thought that it would be nicer if it went for the coastal route for those who live on the coast, but it might not necessarily be nicer for those who live in Palmerston. And there is a sort of bind, because if you suppose you pick up an extra dozen passengers coming through Seacliff and Warrington, you might lose a dozen passengers from Palmerston. And so then you start raising the question of having two bus services. And I don't think we want to, but look, there is actually a rather elegant solution for all of this, buried deep in the legislation and the rules governing school buses. And stay with me here. It requires a leap of imagination. Buried in the rules about school buses is a provision for school buses to carry adults. Now, there is a daily school bus in the morning and one in the afternoon up and down that coast. And what could actually happen is the school bus could pick up school children, of course, which it's always been doing, but also pick up a few adult passengers. And then somewhere like Waitati, the buses could meet and a few passengers could swap. And then the school bus, you see, proceeds over Mount Cargill. Or certainly used to, it might have changed lately, but the school bus then goes over Mount Cargill, and that might actually be helpful for adult passengers as well. Now, we've never had school buses run by the regional council, but I wish that they were. I would like in each region the school buses to be run by the relevant regional council instead of the Ministry of Education. But you and I at this meeting can't really do anything about that.
Thanks, Peter. And another question, if I may, Marion, electric buses. Do you have a view on that? Is it feasible that Dunedin could could replace its diesels with electric buses? From what you know of the public transport nationally through your union contacts, how feasible is it for us to go electric?
Oh, well, I can give a very swift answer to that. We know that that can be done because it was done, and we had electric buses in Dunedin for a number of decades, and then we got rid of them again. But of course, they're referring to trolley buses, and you, of course, mean the modern battery-powered buses.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's feasible. I think that actually the regional council has gradually moved it to run these quite long-term contracts that last up to about 15 years. And I think that with that quite extended service contract, a bus company could probably defray the high initial cost of an electric bus compared to a diesel over those 15 years, where the lower maintenance cost and the lower fuel cost would actually offset the high purchase cost. So
Can't hear you, Peter.
Peter, we can't hear you. Peter, we've lost you.
We got the gist of it, though, didn't we?
He's just muted.
Okay, I'll unmute him.
Unmute, Peter.
That's better.
Yeah, sorry, my phone's running, waiting for it to stop. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
now
I
we
can
can.
now. Can you just summarise your last minute because we lost it?
Yeah, a pesky phone caller interrupted this very important meeting, but I ignored it, so I'll deal with them later. Yes, so where was I? Yes, there are electric bus factories now starting to just knock these things out, sort of 2 or 3 buses an hour, and so the price is tumbling down. And give it, oops, sorry, Greta Thunberg. Give it a couple of years, and you'll get electric buses cheaply. And if you keep this policy of long service contracts, the cost will be defrayed over the long period, and I think it'll work. So we're not far away from them economic. By the way, I just bought an electric car. It's bloody great.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
I can see no further questions. Peter, thank you very much. And thank you for coping with putting the 3 submissions together. We got the difference. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Our last person this morning is, this first half of the morning is Christopher Ford from Disabled Persons Assembly. He's got 2 submissions, 53 and 91. Oh, I can see Christopher. He's there. Christopher, can you unmute yourself, or will I unmute you?
Kia ora,
Oh,
Chair
kia ora.
Marion and councillors. Yes, I'll just bring up my submission here. Okay. So it's my understanding it's 10 minutes presentation and then questions from councillors. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's all yours, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Kia ora tātou, regional councillors. Thank you for giving me the ability to appear before you today via Zoom. First of all, I just wish to acknowledge that the world has changed since the outbreak of COVID-19, and that this will of course impact on the operations and spending decisions of the Regional Council for the year ahead. We also acknowledge the hard work of both staff and councillors during this emergency, especially given the Council's responsibility for overseeing the regional civil defence response to this health emergency.
Thanks, Chris.
The DPA is pleased to see the provision of $1 million additional funding for public transport provision in the 2020-21 year. We strongly hope that some of this increase is directed towards total mobility, which will become free of point of use for COVID-19 alert levels 3 and 4 and into the first part of 2, as we understand that NZTA has extended that to the 30th of June. We also believe that some of this funding should be used to ensure that all buses have audible public announcements, not just some, and we do welcome the start that has been made on the rollout of audio announcements, as is currently the case. DPA is supportive of the funding increase also being significantly directed towards raising bus driver pay to living wage rates. Bus drivers have been an important component of our workforce. They've been essential, in fact, during the alert levels 3 and 4 emergency, and they should, excuse me, continue to be viewed as that going forward. Moreover, increasing bus driver pay rates will act as one means of stimulating the local economy as it recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, and will improve the standard of living of both bus drivers and their whānau. As also in our submission, we make points around the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, particularly pertaining to Articles 4.3, 9, 19, 20, and 29. Our recommendations are, we strongly recommend that the ORC and DCC work collaboratively to give effect to the proposed Central City bus loop service, and especially flat rate low fares, as is the case with the Queenstown $2 fares. Expenditure increases such as that for public transport should be deemed important in the post-COVID recovery, especially given that it will stimulate demand for bus services which will be crucial as more people progressively return to work, study, training, school, and ordinary life over the next 6 months to a year. And also, we'd like to see the encouragement of greater use of bus services by all Dunedin residents going forwards. And that really means as well for us, accessible bus services. This includes for disabled people on mainly low and or fixed incomes, and many of us would benefit from having such a scheme in place. We also look forward to the proposed review of the Regional Public Transport Plan, RPTP, and will participate in this process. DPA strongly recommends that all future Otago Regional Council annual plan and 10-year plan documents, as well as essential council information, be published in accessible formats such as New Zealand Sign Language, easy read, and in formats which can be readily accessed by blind and low vision residents. We hope that the ORC communications team will take this on board and that there will be some expenditure directed towards this. DPA also recommends that the ORC continue its work on projects to mitigate and to use a more familiar recent term, flatten the curve on climate change. Climate change will have many adverse impacts for everybody. Of course, if average temperature rises are not contained to within the 1.5 degrees Celsius maximum agreed to at the Paris Climate Summit in 2016 within the next 10 years. Further, rapid climate change will have an adverse impact on many already socially marginalised and oppressed groups, and that includes disabled people. Disabled people will be impacted in terms of some of us potentially having to move from, for example, lower lying flatter areas such as i.e. South Dunedin and Mosgiel, which is particularly susceptible to rising water table levels and sea level rise, to hillier, less accessible areas. Besides, disabled people and people with health conditions, and indeed all population groups, will face the prospect of having to breathe more unbreathable air, causing a rising incidence of asthma and other respiratory issues, as well as greater levels of anxiety, as we've witnessed during alert levels 3 and 4. And this will be particularly impactful on people with psychosocial disability, mental health disability, and those who experience mental distress. That's why the ORC should continue to fully fund, even in these economically straitened times, climate change oriented programs such as the South Dunedin's Future Project, with collaboration with the DCC, air monitoring work, and other activities which will continue to directly monitor and lower our emissions profile. This is really, really important stuff. PPA recommends that rates be struck at the level of inflation, or that there be a nil increase just for the 2020-21 year. In saying this, we recognise the real conundrum, as we believe that ordinary ratepayers should not be overburdened, and this includes in particular low-income ratepayers, while seeking to retain the current level of council services and projects at this time as budgeted for. What should be done to resolve this conundrum is that the Regional Council should obviously look at ways of mitigating the rates burden for lower income households, which there will be more post-COVID. Many disabled people, or at least those who are fortunate enough to own their own homes, are in this category. Therefore, the ORC should look to fund its operations for the next year more by seeking to make up any shortfalls through utilising dividends from Port Otago, short-term borrowing, greater reliance on central government funding, and encouraging lower income earners to access government rates relief grants, remission schemes, and allowing ratepayers more time to pay rates. Cutting expenditure on services and projects at this time, particularly in the area of managing climate change and public transport, will be short-sighted and compound problems further down the track. Therefore, we believe that running a short-term deficit while things are tight for everyone would be the best way of managing the situation until the economy returns to normal activity. That, therefore, is the summary of our submission, and I'd now like to hear from any councillors who've got any questions.
Okay, I can't see anybody lining up at the moment, but I'll do my normal start as they come on board. One of the things that struck me, Christopher, during this COVID-19 has been, it's a new group of people who are being hit financially. Someone like me on superannuation, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I haven't had any greater costs, okay, than I've had before. So in a sense, when we talk about, it's like we're getting a new group of unemployed.
Yes.
So when we talk about low paid, we've got to make a distinction between those of us on super or government support and those newly into it. Would you like to comment about that? How the hell you work your way through that?
Yes, it is a very complex issue. I guess that you're referring to the increasing number of unemployed and underemployed for the middle
Absolutely.
class.
Yep.
And that's going to be an issue. Whereas for disabled people, there has historically been a tendency to be in the lower income quintile population. We're always within that demographic, in the majority anyway. So really what you're trying to work through is obviously try to rework the regional plan, obviously, from what it was before COVID. But as I said in the submission, I think the two core things are public transport and climate mitigation, because the climate crisis is going to continue on regardless.
Yeah.
And also, it's been pointed out too, that the current pandemic has been, to its extent, generated by the closeness between the animal world and the human world, and how that's coming closer together. Therefore, there's more of a risk of zoonotic transmission of future human viruses, and these events are going to increase more and more. So it's within our interests to continue spending on things that will mitigate climate change, and at least maybe even reverse it over time. And that benefits everybody, including disabled people.
Okay.
These sorts of things are quite important, but also the public transport spend is an important component of that, and making sure that we have accessible public transport, such as buses, not just within the city limits of Dunedin, but also interregional transport is another issue that needs to be worked on too.
Yeah.
Because I can't get easily on a bus, for example, between here and Oamaru or Balcliffe or whatever. There are very few accessible public transport platforms in rural and provincial New Zealand. That really needs to be worked on as well. And perhaps the Otago Regional Council could take the lead on this.
That's a very interesting point. I'd never thought about that before. I can
Yeah.
see Michael about to ask you a question. Michael
Yes.
D.
Yeah, Christopher, thank you. Your submissions are always very clear and well articulated, and I'm grateful to you again. And thank you. Actually, you anticipated my question perfectly in your last two sentences. I was going to ask you about regional connections. So thank you for mentioning that, and I'm sure that you'll make that point vigorously to our RPTP review,
Yes.
which I hope is in the next few months. But going back to the long-term relationship of ORC and DPA, Christopher, you'll remember as well as I do that for years we had often quite serious discussions about fundamental things such as access to buses, such as kneeling, such as curbside. And then when it came to the hub in Moray Place, Great King Street, we had lots of discussions with you about DPA and issues there. Could you give us a reflective view right now to help us all on how we are doing in terms of access, both to vehicles and to the information and facilities at the hub, and to our written material on our website to do with PT? Tell us what we need to do better now.
Yes, I think that that's a very fair question, Councillor Dika. I think really what needs to happen is that while there was discussion with DPA and some other stakeholders around the bus hub, it wasn't very full, I have to say, given that the council officer, the former council staff member who dealt with this mainly has now left, and
Yep.
that is a relief to us, quite frankly. But anyway, we do know now there are a number of issues that need to be addressed around that bus hub. For example, the accessibility to the toilet. There's also some accessibility issues that have been identified by John Marable from Disability Information Service, who's an accredited barrier-free auditor around the access to the bus hub, around, for example, the placement of the strips and so forth. I think there needs to be some renewed engagement around that, around just addressing those, well, maybe small but not insignificant design issues which emerged, I think, and also making sure that the bus hub, which is, you know, in a good, relatively good area, by the way, is still, for all its faults, that we can actually work on correcting that. In terms of information, there needs to be, I think, a significant amount of improvement. And we've also made the same point to the DCC and the endless submissions. I think that, relatively speaking, comparatively speaking, that the council could devote some of its communications budget in the coming year to review the accessibility of its information, and that includes making more information, key information, available in New Zealand Sign, and also an easy read for people with learning disability. And even it's very helpful for people who have English as a second language, of which we're getting an increasing number of, particularly with our growing refugee populations. We need to make sure that information is available and accessible to all, for all of our populations.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris. That's very helpful.
Thank
Maybe
you.
you and I and Julian could meet at the hub one day, and you could point out the things that need to be looked at and tweaked.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm also part of a group called Access for All, which we could also invite you and other council officials to. And John Marable would be quite a crucial person to have at any such meeting, because he's identified those issues as well, and which we were, yes, as I say, we were involved in those early discussions, but I think looking back in retrospect, they were rushed. They were rushed because there was some sort of feeling that there had to be time given to go for the consenting process and all of that sort of thing. But what should have happened in reality is to have a really good conversation which would have drilled down to those essential points.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for that question, Michael. This is about problem solving, and
It is
really appreciate it. So thank you. Unless you've got any final comments you'd like to make to us.
Yes, I would like to say thank you, Chair Marion, for actually meeting with us informally, albeit. We will be extending an invitation to you to come along to a DPA meeting. We will be meeting at least virtually for a while we settle down into levels 2 and then hopefully 1. And it's great to have also to see other councillors on this call today and to have the questions from councillors Deaker and Hobbs. And thank you very much. And we hope to have further engagement between DPA and the disability community in general and ORC.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, people. We're going to take a break now until 11 o'clock. And then we really have a whole lot of whoops, this message come on board to me. We'll have a whole lot of work on the water ferry, the Queenstown ferry, and then the Chamber of Commerce, I think, is our last one. So thank you, people. If we take a break, and we'll come back on at 11 a.m. Thank you. But I want to get back onto my, oh, well, I'm going to somewhere else. Hi, lovelies. Carmen, are you there? No. We're going to lose Kevin to a dentist. No, to a doctor. Michael's at a dentist. Okay, people, are we ready to go? I can't see what's happening outside. Okay, Ethel is ready to come on board to talk to us. Ethel Stevens, and he's coming and talking to us about the Wakatipu ferry. So can, Jasmine, can you invite him on, please?
Meeting.
Oh, I can see you. Sorry, Ethel. So
Yes,
couldn't
I'm
see
here.
you. Unmute.
Hey, am I?
Yep, you're on and you're way to go.
Thank you.
The way we do this, Ethel, is that we give you about 10 minutes, more or less, and then we ask you some questions. So these series are on the Wakatipu ferry.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to submit. I made my written submission, and I'll assume that it's all been read and understood. There are one or two little areas that I want to touch on. First, on the second page, I've made the comment that at Bayview, it is not uncommon for the 9:45 p.m. departure to leave a number of customers. In fact, it's at Queenstown, which is after everybody's been over to Queenstown, had a couple of drinks, dare I say it, and dinner, feeling quite good. They go over to the water taxi to find that it's quite a long queue, and there's a good chance they might have missed it. I have to say, all of this is pre-COVID-19. And assuming that in the post-vaccine world, normal service will resume. Not everybody's idea in Queenstown that it should, but there you go. Let's assume for a moment that it will. And so there's two ways of looking at that. It's wildly popular, or the boats aren't big enough. So in specifying in the tender how the service should be designed, it will be worthwhile noting to prospective tenderers that they've either got two boats or one boat that's big enough, because it is very, very popular. To the extent that I know of one young lady who lived over in Calvin Heights, and because the morning boat from Calvin Heights to Queenstown didn't have enough space in it, she reduced to taking the bus. And even in my most public spirited days, as Councillor Wilson will understand, I could never quite persuade anybody to take a 2-hour bus journey from Calvin Heights to Queenstown. After a tour of the Frankton Shopping Centre, then the airport, and finally along to the hub, and then a determinate wait there while another bus. So it's not a good option. The other interesting thing is that we had a couple of rainfall events here this year, and for those on the staff who will understand, once the level gets up to about 310.8 metres, it starts to cover all the jetties.
Yep.
No boat can get alongside a jetty, with the possible exception of the Hilton. So I think they've got a floating jetty, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But for every other jetty that they stop at, 310.8 means unusable. And we went to 311.4 this year, which is metres doesn't sound a lot, but it is a lot, and it takes a while to drain away. So it meant that the jetties were basically out of service for on two separate occasions collectively almost a month. So for ratepayers, conscious of each dollar that they give to the council every year, councils, you know, they're paying for a service that they simply can't get. So with a little bit of design work and a little bit of could raise the duties in a step sort of way to ensure that the service could continue. But other than that, it's a great service, and everybody over here in Kelvin Heights just totally supports it. And it's not only the Hilton, obviously they sort of underpin it a wee bit, but there's a Christian camp along here which is heavily used during the season, and a lot of more and more permanent residents in Kelvin Heights. They use it all the time. So it's a great service and it's a great initiative, and ratepayers over here are more than happy to pay for it. At least this one is.
Thank you, Ethel. I've got Kate wishing to ask a question.
Thanks, Ethel. I've actually got a couple, but I presume if you get the service, you'd want it to have real time so people can see when it is arriving, but also potentially, it's an interesting question how many people are waiting, and I don't even understand how they do that on buses, but having an idea of availability, is that something you'd like to see us thinking about generally for public transport?
Well, you mean by a little device, a little readout at the bus stop tells you when it is. I think that's helpful. That's really helpful. Yes. Now for the buses, there might not be anyone there to read. I have to comment on the buses in Kelvin Heights. They are distinguished every day, every hour, by the absence of people on them. Poor old bus driver gets round to the tee at the golf club, stops where he is, which is where he catches up on his timetable, because he's way ahead of it. Because he ain't done any stopping to pick up any people.
Can the other question, and you've ticked that you want to see this trial as quickly as possible, as in this financial or next financial year, and I'm just wanting to tease out, it is for the locals, the service, as much as it is for the tourists, but the concern would be that people will find it easier to take a car than use a, because the roads won't be congested potentially if it doesn't come back to normal as you're used to, and that the trial fails because people don't use it. Whereas if it's at a higher tourism numbers, then it will be better used. You're not concerned about that?
Well, it has to be said that the tourists are the dominant users, to the extent now that I was talking to one lady, American, on the boat one day, and she said, I asked her how, because I do my surveying of people during that time, and I asked her how did she pay for the trip? I wanted to be too nosy. And she said, well, it's just part of the package cost of the trip. So it's all built in. They just turn up, all paid for. So that the tourism part's big. But the local parts right now, middle of winter, is never going to be. This is going to be seasonal, no question about that. It's just the nature of life.
Okay.
By less so. But and at the moment, the mall in Queenstown is a deserted place some days. Not so much now on level 2, but I got a photograph of myself taken on the mall the other day, and I was the only person on it. Unbelievable. So we're talking about a post-vaccine setting.
So that's the question: is if we haven't got a vaccine and tourism we haven't opened our borders substantially, other than maybe Australia, would you want us to trial this, or should we do it in should we be saying it at post-COVID?
No, I think you should try it, but I you know, don't trial a full-fledged itinerary. Just take peak times.
Okay, peak times only. Thank you. Great.
Oh, yes, sorry. Alexa, followed by Brian. Alexa.
Yeah, getting there. Apologies, my cursor was over where I was typing some notes. Ethel, good. Your sense is pretty much the same as mine. I think I understand that too, and I think we should be going on with some sort of trial as well and having ourselves well set up for whatever circumstances we come to. But my question is it worth having a bus down Kelvin Peninsula at all? Should we just lop that off if we get the ferry service happening?
Every so often someone uses it. I would think if it could be streamlined so that the commuter times in the morning and the commuter times in the evening meant that you could come out of Queenstown, stop at the hub, and given that it might be a stop of perhaps 10, 15 minutes, pick up a bus that then went directly to Kelvin Heights and didn't go for the scenic rides around the airport and around the Market Park shopping centre. Then you might want to continue with that scaled back approach for a while longer. But gee, give that sort of trial a year, and I think there would be some merit. And if it didn't work, then it was finished. But at the moment, it's wonderful. Every hour drives past our place. Oh, there's no one on it. It never has been.
Yeah, I accept that as the bus route that has never worked. Yeah. And it's of all of them, that is the one. It's the worst. I haven't seen the actual numbers on it, but I can see it with my own eyes. I don't need to see the numbers, and I'm sure they'll back me up. That is the one. That is Kelvin Peninsula to 5 Mile. The bus, in some ways, is working on some parts of that route, like 5 Mile to the hub or 5 Mile to Remarkables Park. But the Remarkables Park to Kelvin Peninsula doesn't work. And the issue with trying to make that Kelvin Peninsula more direct is that you would be lopping off the parts of the route that actually do work. So it's a very, very tricky thing to do. And I suspect that Kelvin Peninsula is better served by a ferry than a bus. I mean, I've talked with our transport people, and we haven't seen a way that's really obvious forward, and I haven't seen an obvious way forward come through the submissions either. So I am thinking that we do have to reconsider whether a ferry service actually replaces that bus service, unless, and somebody made a good point just before you actually, and I knew this to be true and haven't ever followed it up, that people can ride the school buses. And then there may be some peak opportunity there, but I know the school bus for Kelvin Peninsula is also poorly used because of the fact that Jack's Point starts there and it goes all the way around Kelvin Peninsula and then before it gets to the school. So the Jack's Point kids might be sitting on that bus for 45 minutes before, to do something that would be a 15-minute drive. So there's a lot of issues to work through there, but what I'm putting out is basically we might need to think about the ferry actually being the sensible public transport option rather than the bus.
Wouldn't get an argument from me about that, or anyone else that I know.
Thanks, Cecil. Thanks, Steve. Can I go to Brian, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ethel. Look, I'm to a certain degree just repeating Kate's question, but I am nervous that this trial could do more harm than good. Like we're trying to get determine whether, with some confidence, whether this has a business scenario. And you've said that it's underpinned by the tourism, and there isn't tourism there for a period of time. What's your, I think you talked about, you've surveyed what's your instinct? How many people are going to be on this ferry in your scenario, do you think?
Yeah, I have to say that all my comments and submissions are predicated on a pre-pandemic scenario. Now, the thing that surprises me with the ferry and with tourism in Queenstown in general is how there is less and less a shoulder season. It always used to be a shoulder season. Then there was the ski season. Then there was another shoulder season and we got into summer. But there's so much going on now. I mean, I talk about golf, for example. Now, the favourite time to play golf is March and April. And
yeah, are you talking post-COVID or pre-COVID?
Pre-COVID, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any argument about that. That's why we're talking about doing the trial. My question really is, should the trial be delayed a year, realistically?
You could, as long as it was a service still working. Because even though we're in a pandemic world, people still use it. If I go to Queenstown, I will always use the boat, never drive.
Yeah, and how many people are typically on it?
I haven't been since I was allowed to emerge from my house, but I see it stopping at the Bayview Jetty on a regular basis. So they're picking someone up and dropping someone off.
They're dropping someone up and dropping someone off.
Sorry, I don't have any stats on it.
Thank you.
It's just come in. It's just started work in the last week or so.
Oh, I see. It's been, sorry, just to clarify that, Ethel, it hasn't been working during the downtime. Hasn't been an essential service like a bus.
Oh.
Okay, so in a way, it's kind of hard for us to assess, and it might be closer in a couple of weeks to assess how it's being used. Although you did say something. You did say, do you even go across there in the middle of winter, or is it too cold? I've been on the ferry.
No, it's not too cold. The boats are quite good, quite dry. You have a few layers on, but
right.
It's fine.
Which you need anyway for walking around.
It's still preferable to driving.
Okay.
Much more preferable.
Okay, understand that. Ethel, I think we've worn out questions, so thank you very much. The next person who's coming on is Sean Kelly. Okay, people, and Sean.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ethel.
Bye.
Sean is here. Sean, can you hear us? You are audio only.
Yeah, I must have pressed the wrong button, sorry, but
that's okay. That's all right. So what actually happens is that you talk for up to about 10 minutes, and then we ask you some questions, and we've read your submissions. So want to go ahead, please.
Yes. Really, my main concern about the testing of the test running of the water taxi ferry services, Kelvin Heights around that area. So it's simply only scratching the surface. KGET have got an application for a ferry service running from down the Kawaira River down from Lake Hayes and Bridesdale and Shotover Country area up past Remarkables Park and onto the lake Frankton Arm and into Queenstown and doing pickups and drop-offs the Frankton Arm as well. The bulk of the people are really from Lake Hayes and Bridesdale and Shotover Country. Equally, the bulk are at Jack's Point and will be at Henley Farm. So I think testing only on the Frankton Arm is really just scratching the surface, and I truly believe that the working from Lake Hayes would be the ultimate test, although it has to be modifications under the Kowara Dam to get up and down safely. And the QLDC have got a blanket no park and ride on all the areas, and I think the no park and ride at the Lake Hayes estate, where it's a floodplain there, everything should be taken on its own merit, and there would be no problem having park and ride at the Lake Hayes estate.
Can I just come in for a minute there, Sean?
Yeah.
To be able to extend to the Lake Hayes estate and to the Shotover, and even round the corner to Hanley Farm, you would need, wouldn't you need jetties, or are there jetties there?
We've proposed down the Kowara River. We've put a plant. We've got an application in now with jetties proposed and everything for Lake Hayes estate.
Okay.
And you would need a jetty around at Henley Farm and Jack's Point, but we have got an application in for a ferry service from Lake Hayes coming back into Queenstown.
So are you saying, can I get this clearly in my head? So are you saying, hey, let's not do this until we've got all the other things in place and make it a wider trial?
Well, it would take quite a bit of time to get the consent for under the Kowara Falls Dam modified to take the ferries down and up. But I think the bulk of the work is the bulk of the people would be from around those Lake Hayes area and Shotover Country and Bridesdale. At the moment, it's just around Frankton Arm, and it's only the Kelvin Heights area, and I don't think they're picking up many from anywhere but the Hilton, really.
I can assure you that they've picked up me on occasions, but
yeah,
it is only on occasions. Alexa, got a question.
Hi,
sorry,
Sean. Hi, Sean. I'm here. I've just got a couple of questions. I see that you'd like to see us run a trial on a far greater situation, down to Lake Hayes and Jack's Point. But really, those destinations are quite some time away, I think. And I mean, how long do you think it's going to take to get modifications under that bridge, considering there's not even a resource consent yet?
Well, yes, hopefully the consent will be issued soon. Alexa, I'm not counting our chickens before they hatch, but I'm fairly confident we'll get the consent. But it would be another length of time to get the consent to modify under the dam. So yes, but go ahead and get the trial done in if it's just Frankton Arm only. But that will only give you a small idea of it, I think, Alexa.
I agree with you, but I think if we just keep putting off and keep waiting, nothing gets done. We can trial something now on the Frankton Arm, which will give us wonderful information about density of populations and how they might use a water service, which would surely benefit any service that you can come up with. Like, I totally agree with you, a service right down to Lake Hayes and Jack's Point is in the big picture. But in terms, we can't be waiting for that before we trial anything. I would have thought that it would have been beneficial to actually have a good, strong trial of what happens when you have that density of people and a ferry service available, which could then, that information will then certainly inform what happens where you've got even greater densities.
Yeah, agree, Alexa. I think go ahead with the trial. It will give you an indication. So yeah, I'm supporting get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I see you saying to get it done as soon as possible. But how about the COVID thing and the fact that we know that probably the people have I actually do know that there's I've seen plenty of people, as Ethel does, getting that ferry from Bayview. I was out on my paddleboard on Saturday and Sunday, and I saw people doing that. So it is happening. It's not running as often as it was, but it is definitely starting to happen and people are using it. So it isn't just the Hilton.
Yeah.
I don't even think there's anyone staying at the Hilton at the moment, or hardly anyone. They're pretty much closed. So, but it is. It'd be interesting. I think we need to ask the operator what their numbers are. And I know it's been tricky getting those numbers, but we're going to need them, because making the decision to run it now or later is interesting, and it'll tell us something about the locals. Sorry, go ahead. What's your answer?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very lean at the moment. Watching the water taxi going out, coming in and out. There's not many people on it at all, but it's a unique situation. Once we get back to a new normal, it'll. It used to be reasonably steady, but since COVID, it's definitely stopped. But I think we need to get the trial going as quick as possible.
Thank you, dear. We've got Kevin wanting a question.
Just unmuting. Yeah, look, sorry about that. And it probably is just the balance of doing a trial in this environment and doing the trial of your new proposed system, which sounds to me, if we're going to be heading to where the people are, and the people might most likely to use this system, would be a worthwhile wait. So, I suppose what I'm saying is, do you feel we could probably be possibly be prejudicing the opportunity to carry on a service if we get very poor uptake at the moment from a trial?
Yeah, it's really, at the moment, it as I said earlier, it is lean. But when do you start? I think maybe over the winter season, July, will give you, if the ski fields are open, that will give us a reasonable idea, I think.
Right.
That's a good point.
Good, thanks for your help.
Any further questions? There not being so, Sean, thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for coping with the phone rather than the full video. Appreciate that.
No, it's fine.
Okay, dear.
No worries. Thank you.
The next person is David Linnett, I think I've got. And David is submission 180. David, are you there? Oh, yes, I can see him. Hydro Tech. Is that you, David Linnett? They're connecting to audio, man. Hi, gotcha. Are you David Linnett, one of you?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Hi,
I'm Lee.
You're Lee. Okay. You, David and Lee, you've got, I'm Marion Hobbs, I chair, but you've got about 10 minutes to persuade us of your argument, and then we'll fire some questions. So thank you. Off you go.
Yeah, no worries. I suppose we'll just give ourselves a little bit of a background about what we do. We're hydrotax, so we're basically tourism activity on the waterfront here in Queenstown. We've been operating for around 7 years now. Team-wise, we've around 13 staff, down to 8 at the moment, obviously with the COVID crisis at the moment, a bit slower. But yeah, we operate another thing as well called jet ski tours, so that operates just during the summer.
Yeah, no, so I suppose obviously from our perspective is looking at what you guys are looking at here, that we're happy for the trial to go ahead, and we're in support of it to a certain degree. On really for us, it's actually, without that happening, there is no decision for us on where we're at, because we currently operate from what used to be called Lapsley and Butson Wharf, which the Queenstown Lake District Council bought probably nearly 12 months ago, and probably a little bit longer now, but yeah. So for the last 18 months, we've been trying to look at renewing our lease on that wharf, which has been postponed due to the proposed water ferry service that the council have bought that wharf in sole purpose to actually run the operation from. So at the moment, obviously there's us and another 5 or 6.
There's 5 other businesses on the wharf as well, and we've just we're in a situation of limbo, and we have been for nearly 18 months now, and it's directly, every time we talk to our local council about it, it's directly linked to the ferry service. From our perspective, I suppose we can't really get our heads around it because there's already a service in place. It's running in conjunction with all the other businesses on the waterfront already. They have their own wharf. So we just can't get any answers, and we don't see that the service is going to multiply into such a bigger service in the next 5 years, that it can't just continue on as it is, basically. So, but our main issue is we want the trial to go ahead because we just need to get some answers in this COVID crisis, especially where we're selling off property, we're refinancing assets to get the business to survive this and try and get all our staff through this as well. But at the moment we're talking to the banks, but the banks need business plans, and they need five-year business plans for COVID especially.
Yeah, we currently have basically
we don't have a lease. We have a 4-week lease.
4 weeks left.
It's insane.
And I suppose on the water taxi side of things, we've obviously got one operating at the moment, and I suppose it's, for me, running a business, it's quite difficult to understand how that's going to be funded when obviously it's struggling to do so at the moment. And now obviously we've had this big COVID crisis happened as well, and tourism numbers from my side, I've got motels, and we're sort of looking at a 5-year plan of this potentially taking to get back up to where we were before. And is the water taxi going to be servicing the whole public, or just really the Calvin Heights and a small proportion of Frankton? So it's a difficult one.
I'm just confused about something, and you haven't finished it, and before you finish talking, where is the wharf you're talking about? Is it in Queenstown? Is it on the Frankton side? It's in Queenstown.
Queenstown Bay.
Queenstown Bay, yes. So it's right just on the water.
So when you're going to get onto the water taxi, there are about 4 or 5 different boats go from that particular place. Have I got that right?
There's three main wharfs in town. There's the main town pier, which is currently KJET, basically the main operator from the main town pier. We're the next one over, called Lapsley Butson Wharf. There's 6 operators there. We've 2 businesses running off there, but there's 6 in total. This is the one that was purchased by the council, QLEC, and the reason for buying it was for public transport, was the main reason. On the next wharf over is Real Journeys, and that's where the current water service runs from. Yeah, so our concern is basically we kind of feel like we're potentially sacrificial lambs to accommodate a service that's already in place.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, because I couldn't. Do you want to? Is there more things you want to say, or should I call in some other questions?
No, I suppose we just want to know. I suppose really is what are the visions for this service? How big do we really realistically think the service is going to be? It's not the same population as Fuller's, for example, that operate in Auckland. I understand the idea of trying to reduce traffic on the roads. We all know it is a problem, and we're not denying any of that as well. But we personally, we just want to have a mutually kind of beneficial agreement that the ferry service works. We all get to run our businesses as we've always done, because it's soul destroying stuff at the moment, trying to get any answers. And the fact that we've only 4 weeks left on our lease, it's just not on, really, as a business. It's just disgraceful.
Okay, thank you, dear. I'll go to questioners. First it's Michael Deeker, and then it's Alexa, and then it's Hilary.
Thanks.
Yeah, I actually put my hand up, Marion, to ask Sean Kelly a question, but that was me being just a fraction late. But since I've got the opportunity, can I ask the hydro attack men, that wharf you're talking about, I know exactly which wharf you mean, and it seems to me to be perfectly capable of being a multi-purpose wharf. It's got space, it's got enough length to cope with you, Water Ferry, and whoever else needs to come in there at scheduled times and use that wharf. Is that your view as well?
Yeah, and especially where we are, we're on the inside wharf, so we're on the inside leg. We've probably a draft of around a metre of depth at the water, basically. And also we are beside Perky's floating bar, so our boats are very small. They're only like 1.5 meters wide, and they're 5.5 meters long, so we can get away operating in such a shallow bit of water. And that's why we don't understand. There's no ferry will ever fit into where we are, basically. So we don't understand why we can't get decisions because of a potential ferry service that can't fit in where we operate from. So that's why we're a little bit confused on the whole idea. And yeah, I think it's very easy to schedule boats departing and coming in at the same time. It doesn't take long for a boat to load up and move on, you know.
Thank you.
Thanks. I feel your pain and I agree with you.
Alexa.
I can hear your pain and your frustration, and that's very, very difficult. I don't know why the QLDC is acting in that way, and I haven't got any impact over that, but I do understand that the QLDC has long viewed Frankton Arm as its alternative highway, and it has been extremely protective of that for as long as I've lived here, which is 30 odd years.
Yeah.
It has always realised that there is no other land way to get into the centre of town from the big population bases, and therefore the Frankton Arm would eventually provide that. So I guess that's where their reticence to put any leases in place comes from at this point, is from that, well, we've got to be really careful because we have to protect that highway. Apart from that, it seems to be clear that you think there's plenty of room for you and the water taxis. I don't think that we see a very large service at this point, and the trial certainly isn't for anything much bigger than what we've got. It's a bit more frequent, that's about it. Yeah. And in terms of a small population, it is serving a relatively small population, which is currently very expensively serviced by a bus, which pretty much no one uses because you can't efficiently get from Kelvin Peninsula to Queenstown by bus. You can't efficiently get there by car either. A ferry service makes a very, very, very good sense from that. So I guess you're hoping that our trial will produce something that will give the QLDC more information to work with, that will hopefully allow them to be more certain about what wharves they need and to be able to let you in there.
Yeah. We just don't want to, basically, every business is going to run out of loss this year. There's not one business that won't operate at a loss this year. We don't want to be in the position where we survive this year, a few $100,000 in the hole after doing so, and then we're told, right, you're off your wharf now.
Yeah, and that's a very difficult scenario. I don't really know how to help you with that. I'm very happy to talk it through with you at any time if you think that's worth doing.
Yep.
You can easily contact me as your representative here
yep.
On the ORC. But I'm not really very sure what to do about this.
Yeah.
I can't quite see it. Yeah, I think the issue you're running against is that there has long been an aspiration for a ferry service, and it's coming close to fruition. And I think you'll find nervousness in the QLDC about its leaseholders, and its commitment will be to public transport over private operation. But if that's not valid, somehow that argument has to come through, and I don't know how. But
yeah, like that's our concern. Like for me, I would, any dealings that we have, and this is no offense to anyone that we've been talking to, there's an exact lack of knowledge on how the waterways work from people that are making decisions on it, and it's we've asked before we're happy just to be involved and say exactly what we're thinking. Like, we're not just trying to be biased towards obviously our own business. We understand what needs to be done, and there's a lot of the whole community to take care of. But we do feel some of the decisions have been made aren't realistic on how the waterway work. You know, it's ferry service is just another boat movement. We've been told that if the ferry's running, it's not going to be a space for all these operators. But these operators have been in there; they've made their investments already, and another boat moving in and out is just like a roadway. Basically, you let that boat go first and you go next, whoever's coming to the right. That's where we kind of feel there's a big hole there, that there's some actual operators should be involved in these decisions, not so much in the decisions, but in the consultation at least.
one last question, Marion, if you'll humour me.
We've got 2 more people after you, so be very brief.
Very quick.
Please.
Are you working with the other operators on that wharf to try and come to some solution?
Yes, yeah. We've had meetings with all the councillors, well, not all the councillors, but the majority of the councillors, and also with the mayor as well. We've been promised we'd have a lease for a year guaranteed, and our lease expires in 4 weeks. So we still don't have it. We've been having meetings since last November on this.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, Hilary, followed by Brian. Thank you. Hilary.
Hi guys, I fully understand that uncertainty is the enemy.
Yeah.
And I think they're 2 separate issues. In some respects, I'm more than happy to get in amongst your issue with the Queenstown Lakes Council. Having a legal background, I'll probably have some idea of where you're going and what you're up to. And I'm happy to either be like with a delegation from us, or what on my own, feel free to contact me.
Okay.
Try and get to the bottom of what you're doing there. You can get me through the. As regards the trial of the ferry, though, if we trial the ferry now and everyone thinks that its usage wouldn't be as much now. So if we get in amongst a trial now, and then we've had the trial, and then people, which they inevitably will, it seems to me, start saying, oh, well, that trial really, we've got to imagine there was more people than there really was, because the trial was at a time when tourists weren't here and things. So at that stage, we haven't had a trial, because we're expected to make a decision on the basis of a trial that everybody accepts. Even before we start, people are going to say, we've got to imagine people who aren't there on it. So it makes sense to have a trial when the people who aren't our imaginary friends, but are real people, could be on it, so as we can actually trial something real. Otherwise, we just may as well do modelling and forget about the trial in the first place, to me. But that's a separate issue. What you seem to want, to me, is to get your situation sorted, and it's not really anything to do with the ferry at all. It's just Queenstown Lakes is saying it's to do with the ferry trial and long fingering you. If you just leave the ferry trial out of it, which is really not here nor there to you, except that you're being told it's part of it. Let's just get in amongst it and try and sort your problem out and see whether there are actually any real practical impediments to sorting your uncertainty out to get you back on the road as soon as possible. So get in touch with me if you want to. But is it that the ferries are just an impediment because they say it's an impediment, not because it's anything to do with it?
I mean, but that's the reason they're giving us, and we don't fully agree with it either, to be honest, because I just don't. There's so much wharf space there, and there's already a service operating from there. With the way boats will be working, and if they're scheduled, it's going to be like a bus stop. They're not going to be parked at the bus stop for an hour, so they're going to be coming in, dropping off, and going on to the next location. So I don't see why all of a sudden we need 6 businesses displaced for extension of a ferry service that's not scalable to a huge size compared to what it is already. It's just more frequent ferry times. So yeah, I don't feel like we're been told the truth either. I think we're been just kept at arm's distance for some reason that we don't understand really, but it's just it's impossible to do business like this.
Well, get in touch with me and I'll get in amongst it, and obviously Alexa will too.
And it's not that we're against the ferry service. I mean, I would like to see more information on the ferry service, i.e. on a feasibility study, whether it's cost effective, where's the numbers. It would be interesting to know what the numbers are, but obviously they're not public knowledge, are they? If the water ferry service, what they're operating to now, how much do they pick up from Calvin Heights? Who do they pick up? Is it mostly from the Hilton? What proportion of that is, guests that are staying at the Hilton to residents over there? So
if we engage with it, it may or may not be public information.
It's not public, it's still private, because it's private operation, and they have not given us those figures, and they won't, and nor, I guess, should they, until we commit to paying something.
Yeah.
So until we put something in place and are paying for it, we don't get those numbers and they aren't public information, which is something I argue with, but that's as it is. I can't change that.
That's kind of chicken for the egg sort of thing there. But
And just one thing I would say, and obviously I know Sean quite well, so I'm not been biased on, but like the idea of a form of a jet boat going down the river to me makes sense, because that's where the population is. It's Lake Hayes, it's shot over country. That's where
your service
when you're driving on the roads, that's shot over that area between like BP and Lake Hayes and stuff. That's where all the issues, well, not all the issues are, but a lot of the issues are as well. So you need to get down to the population if you're really going to try and access all the right people.
Yeah,
that's why.
Maybe one of the next people coming on to talk is from the Kelvin Community Ratepayers or Community Board. It would be. Yeah. Have you two people talked to that particular group?
No,
no. We've just been talking to QLEC. And,
they have been taking numbers,
right?
And that might be worth a conversation with them. I'm sorry, I had. Brian, did you still have a hand up? No. Can't hear you. Kate?
Thank you. Sorry, Brian, are you?
I was simply going to say most of the questions have been answered, but look, it's certainly, I've still obviously got questions around governance. I've got questions around if we're going to do a trial, what are the arrangements regarding the wharf, and I'd expect those to be answered before we come to a decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Kate?
Thank you for your presentation, and it's really interesting stuff. And I'm putting your business side aside because I have some sympathy with what Hilary was saying. But I just want to understand, in your mind as people who are out and about, what you're saying is that the Lake Hayes estate and the Shotover country are the people that need a more efficient transport system to get them into town as public transport, and that would be best done by a boat service rather than that's sort of what Mr. Kelly was saying earlier. Is that your view as well when you talk about
yeah, I think a prop jet boat or a prop taxi that's there already, for example, they would need also an access down the river, because it's a very limited service, if we're honest. Like, you've got Kelvin Heights, and that's pretty much it. Like, that's going to access town. You know, it's a very limited service considering the wider community. Whereas at least if you can get down the rivers, there's population down there as well. Now, I don't know, obviously, if that's going to work for the people down there. Are they all tradies that need their vans to go to work or drop their kids to school? I don't know, obviously, but we're just thinking like you'd need to access more of the population for it to be a really big improvement on the roads.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's hard to sort of, I know they've mentioned that the community are in support of it, but again, with the limited information, as a sort of a ratepayer and nothing to do with the business side of things, I live in town, so obviously an increase in rates for a service that's only going to service Kelvin Heights and a small majority of that's at Frankton, I think is hard one to swallow if everybody knew the actual costs. So what was, if people have all come out and said they're in favour of it, which is good, and I would be in favour of it, but it's very hard, and as Alexa said, it's very difficult to know when you're not got the numbers that are actually using it to actually establish whether it should be supported or not. And I think obviously, if you've got majority of Fernhill that aren't even going to be remotely affected by it, or even getting the benefits from it. Certainly, if Shotover country and Lake Hayes aren't going to be picked up from there either. We've been to a couple of meetings where obviously that they've said that they'll bus them in to that place in Frankton Marina, that they'll bus them into there, and then obviously you'll get off a bus and go into town. And my question to that was, well, is the bus then not going into town? And they said, well, no, the bus goes into the town. So my question was, well, why would I get off the bus if I'm already on it that's going to town to get on a ferry to come into town? I suppose, look, on a ratepayer side, from my side is more clarity on what the cost is and everything else, but on a business side of things is that we're just obviously at a loss to what we can do.
Okay, look, thank you very much. We have some other people waiting in the waiting room to talk with us.
Yep.
Thank you.
No
Cheers.
worries.
Thank you guys. Take care.
I think the next person, I'm not sure. It's either David Linnett or it's David Mayhew. Thank you. It's David Mayhew. Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Okay. I'm Marion Hobbs. I don't need to introduce myself to you, and this is the council. Up there, David, you are from the Kelvin Heights, Kelvin Peninsula, sorry, Community Association.
Correct.
We've just had an interesting discussion in which people have told us that they'd love to know the numbers of who uses the boat. So you have about 10 minutes to talk to us, and then we'll pepper you with questions. Off you go.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. So my submission was principally focusing on the survey around the funding option, which doesn't seem to have come up in the discussion on the live stream that I've seen so far, but principally on the issue of how would you fund it through targeted rates. I suspect that's not going to be a controversial issue. We certainly support the preferred option of the council, taking the existing public transport benefit zone where ferries are part of the integrated transport network. And this has been consistently advocated by the Community Association, of which I'm chair, that the ferry service be part of an integrated system of pricing and ticketing for all modes of public transport in the district. And that was the case back in February to May last year when we participated in the Wakatipu Way to Go process, which developed the draft business case. And then, of course, before the ORC Commissioner Baxter in February this year, when considering the Transport Plan Addendum, which of course you approved in February, end of February. The position is that we have consistently supported the ferry service as a efficient means of public transport, which essentially makes a lot of sense, as I think the council already knows, given the geographical limitations for the Wakatipu. I just ask you to also note that in response to circulating the ORC survey on the funding issues to all 1,900 signatories of our petition, and indeed to our contact list of members and through our website and Facebook page, we did receive a response from the local MP, Hamish Walker, who's written a letter in support of the ferry, dated 21 May of this year, in which he says Queenstown needs cost-effective, environmentally friendly public transport, and the ferry is a great way of delivering this to locals and visitors alike. I can pass that on to you if you want to see the letter itself. As to the trial, which obviously is the thing that's exercising the council at the moment, I think we have to look at this as planning for the future. There's obviously a commitment for public transport in the Queenstown Lakes District, obviously driven by the congestion, which in turn has been driven by the growth issues here. But we shouldn't also forget the need to focus on fossil fuel emission reduction as part of the Queenstown Lakes District Climate Action Plan, which was adopted by the council in March of this year. One of the key outcomes of that plan is that the Queenstown Lakes has a low carbon transport system. And one of the key actions there is to develop what they call transformational options for net zero emissions public transport, obviously partnered with the ORC. The question really now, of course, with the interruption caused by the pandemic, is do we simply delay everything for the period of time within which it'll take for tourism numbers to come back to the region? Or should we use the time now to trial the service and upgrade the infrastructure? One of the key focuses, I think, needs to be on the long-term planning of the service. As you would have heard from some of your previous submissions, there is potential for more dense use further down the river. There is need, even within the Frankton Arm, for there to be a pier at Frankton itself so that it can pick up passengers potentially from the airport, but also the more dense population of Frankton. And if one delays the service trial, I suspect you'll find that QLDC will then delay its capital expenditure on the infrastructure, which I believe they've made some capital commitments towards doing. But that will probably, one delay will probably lead to the other. We have to assume that visitors will return. Certainly residents continue to support the service. As recently as the week before we moved to alert level 2, the Queenstown Ferry operator did a survey looking to see what demand was out there and received 293 responses in 4 days for the service and what modifications might be made to the service to assist people using it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions if I can.
Hilary.
Hello, I'll ask you the same sort of question I've just asked the previous person. If we go ahead with the survey now on the basis that we don't want to delay and it isn't used as much as we imagine it will be when we've opened our borders again to tourists, would you expect that you would then say, don't turn it down because of the low usage, because we've got all these people who will be coming back to use it any moment now? Are you then going to say it isn't a fair trial because people aren't back again? Because that's the fear, essentially, is that trialing something when we know it's suboptimal in a usage thing likely means that we're not actually doing a trial of what we hope to be doing a trial of.
I fully accept that in the uncertain times we're now in with numbers, that must be right, that we cannot expect the usage to be at its pre-COVID volumes. So anecdotally, the use of the boat, according to the pilots driving them, was about 70% of the passenger numbers came from the Hilton. And that was, of course, you'll remember, some of you may remember that the service was introduced via the Hilton because of part of the planning conditions for the Hilton was that they provided bus services for their customers, their visitors to go into town. And they decided the best way of doing that was via a ferry service or a taxi service. So that it must be the case that the Hilton will continue to drive a lot of the numbers. But the point really is that as the congestion on Frankton Road has really hit very hard for all residents and visitors alike, more people will use the service once it's seen to be a reliable option. And I think that's what we're really looking for here. There is a conundrum here, Councillor Calvert. I fully accept that the problem of when do you trial and for what purpose do you trial it? I would not be particularly concerned to be trialling it for numbers of use, but more for what's the feasibility and what do you need to do by way of infrastructure to make it a fully coherent part of the public transport package. But you're right, if you want to delay until more numbers are back so that you can say your service actually meets a certain given criterion of number, then you might be right, you'll have to wait for tourists to come back. But the risk is you then lose the infrastructure spend that the council's already committing itself to.
Although we could lose because there aren't enough people using it, we could just say with a trial, it's not worth doing it. We can't put the burden on ratepayers with that amount of usage when we suspect that the usage will be going up shortly. So we could just not end up with it. If the trial is not good, we either have to do an imaginary friend argument that they'll be back soon, or we have to accept it as a trial with a lot fewer people than we imagine there might be.
The question really is, what's your trial for? Are you simply saying, well, because there might be demand for use of the service, we'll wait until that demand's there before we actually do a trial? Or are you actually going to say, well, looking at it long term, the growth projections for the area mean that we must use the water as part of the transport solutions, that the potential for delivering further service down the river, which may come over time, but that would be an add-on to the existing service that's here now, plus the potential for increasing the service by putting a pier into Frankton and maybe integrating into what the airport has to offer in terms of getting passengers into Queenstown. Do you look at that as being where the future lies anyway, combined with the climate action plan requirements to get people out of their cars, full stop, regardless of congestion, they have to be getting out of their cars. So it's a question of how far do we look forward? And I'm saying that if you take the time to delay for the next couple of years until the international visitors are back in full number, then you're 2 years further behind the curve in developing the public transport solutions we need because of climate change and other demands on our communities.
Thank you. Alexa.
Thanks, David. Kia ora to you. I'm just thinking, given that the next submitter is saying that we shouldn't be providing subsidised, it's just further in the submissions, we shouldn't be providing subsidised visitor transport. Do you think it's actually quite a good time to have a go to actually gauge the local use of this? Is there an argument for that?
Well, I certainly think there is an argument for that, and one of the, but it is again a problem, as some of your earlier submitters have said, that if you can get your car back on the road and into town in 15 minutes, well, why wouldn't you do that? Now, and you've got to encourage people to change behaviour to leave their cars at home, and I agree with Athol Stevens and others who may have said, well, as the default option, I do go into town by the ferry, and I have done it since they resumed the service. There were disappointingly few people on, but they did stop at them over at the marina and pick up a couple there as well. So it does require encouraging locals to use the service, but I think in reality it won't really make a big impact until you've got the Frankton community able to use it directly from a pier in Frankton.
I think that's important too. I've got two other quick questions. First one is, what about the bus? Should we ditch it?
I can't really comment because I don't see the commuter traffic that might be on the bus in the early hours. But certainly it's very rarely used during the course of the day itself. But I don't know what the position is for workers getting into town. But certainly no one that I know here would say we would use the bus as an option, as an alternative to going into town if we had other means.
Okay, and my last question is in consideration of the previous submitter, which you probably didn't hear, but you may have read, Hydrotac, and the next submitter, which I think is $1 Million Cruise, and that people that use the wharves in town, at the moment it looks like their businesses are being displaced by QLDC future plans for a ferry, for the ferry service, and I don't know much about that displacement. But I can imagine that, and we can see in the QLDC plans that in fact they have plans, and it's well written and being consulted on, to actually use those wharves for more community purposes. Do you have a view on what we do about those businesses or how we accommodate them?
No, I don't. Certainly one would like to prioritise the needs of people going into town, and both for business purposes and for residential purposes. If there is an impact for other businesses, obviously that's a matter that has to be managed by the council.
Okay, thank you.
Kate has a question.
Thank you, David. One of the issues that hasn't come up here, and I'm very aware of it being one in Dunedin, is the usability of ferries with bikes. And is that something that you would see happening? It also makes the wharf space quite interesting because bikes take up a lot more room than people. And that may be one of the issues that the Queenstown Lakes District Council were worried about. But do you see there being a demand for people to bike out on your wonderful trails out there to Kelvin Heights and then take the ferry back?
There's certainly a potential for that, and I see from the survey that Queenstown Ferries did, they got that issue was flushed out, and they've now taken a row of seats out to allow bikes to go on the ferry, which on the service that's now been resumed.
I've got my mind as what we should be ensuring is provided in the trial to see, because I could see the locals potentially using that again more as a commute one way and either on the ferry or not, and the other way back on a bike. depending where your winds are. So that's just in my head. So it is a factor that we should be taking into account.
I think so. And as I say, the current service has responded to that need most recently when they restarted with alert level 2 to allow for bikes to go on the boats. Again, looking further into the future, this is probably not the right sort of boat for the ferry option. So we need to keep that in mind as well, that there will be need to develop a better, more fuel efficient, more emission friendly type of boat, and which would then presumably cater for things like putting on bikes, wheelchairs, prams, whatever.
Yeah.
And accessibility. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for David? David, I'm really sorry I had to leap in and out. One of the hard things about Zooming for home is that when the cleaners arrive, I'm in an exciting space.
No apology required. Thank you.
All right. No more questions. Thank you, David, for that. And thank you for your work. And others won't know, but you've done magnificent work, you and your community group on Kelvin Peninsula, looking after people during the shutdown.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. What I heard about it was fabulous. Thank you. Okay, darlings. The next people we have on are the $1 Million Cruise people. Is that correct? And their names are Betty. Is that right? Oh, no, that's Kate Wilson. Wayne and Betty Perkins are coming on. Here we are. Right, found you. Hi, and you're just connecting. Hi, Wayne and Betty. It's Marion Hobbs, the chair of the ORC and the council, with some exceptions because people are away for medical appointments and things. You've got about 10 minutes to put up your argument. If you see me dash out a door, I am sort of listening, but I'm trying to look after something else in my house at the same time. And then 5 minutes for questions after that. So thank you. Off you go.
Cool. I'm Wayne Perkins. This is my wife Betty. I've been operating boats on the lake since 1982, and Betty and I have been operating the $1 Million Cruise since 2007. So about 13 years. We've got a couple of boats, big 25, 28 ton boats. And we work off the QLDC jetty, which of course was purchased 18 months ago. We didn't realise it at the time, but purchased with the intention of setting up a public ferry. And you possibly couldn't purchase a worse site. We lose about 30 half days a year because of extremely rough weather in Queenstown Bay. What else? Give me a moment. We're in a bit of a quandary actually, because of COVID and because of the fact that our existing lease runs out in a couple of months. The council have indicated to us verbally that they'll possibly give us another 12 months. We're sort of thinking we've worked now for a long time to establish a successful business, and for it to be all sort of not so much taken away from us, but for it to basically be taken away so that a few residents of Kelvin Heights can go backwards and forwards to Queenstown to having an evening meal and save the $50 taxi fare. There's a bus service there already, which they don't use. And from our observations, probably 90% of the usage of the actual water taxi / ferry at the moment is from the Hilton and Rees hotels. It's not actually the local residents that use it. So it's a fabulous time to actually run the service to see if local residents do use it. Because at the moment, we don't have any tourists in Queenstown, or we don't have any overseas tourists. And hopefully starting this weekend, we'll have domestic tourism. We'll start again for a while. But come next Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll be back to just locals. So great time to have to have a trial. The other thing, as regards the trial, a lot of the Kelvin Heights residents have given up using the ferry because of the extremely rough weather going around the corner into Queenstown Bay. Using little boats like they do means that they have constant back injuries from people just pounding around the corner. Your average young jet boat driver lasts 18 months, 2 years in the job, and then has to give it up because of chronic back conditions. And it will be the same for commuters going around the corner. Unless you use very large launches, we've got 16-metre launches, 28 tonnes. We lose 30 half days a year. The other smaller operators like Hydro Attack, they lose up to 90 half days a year. And the jetty in Queenstown Bay is extremely dangerous for people getting on and off, which is why we have to cancel. A custom-built sheltered jetty further down the bay with associated bike sheds would be a necessity. As regards to other residents using it, there's no park and ride facilities. So it's very difficult for residents to actually, especially if it's a wet, snowy winter's day, being honest, the majority of people would quite like to drive their vehicle to the ferry, park, climb on the ferry and go to town. But there are no park and ride facilities anywhere. At the Hilton, there is nowhere at all to park. And there's a little parking at Bayview, which is in Kelvin Heights for the residents. But apart from that, nowhere else is there. In a nutshell, that's about it.
Well, sort of. It's just that the main frustration too is us not knowing what's going to happen. You can't run a business with a year lease each time. We couldn't sell a business because you haven't got a lease. So you couldn't borrow money if you needed to because we haven't got a lease. Like, we're in limbo and we just want something done so we know where to go. You know, we can't even sell it because of that. So yeah, that's my main bugbear. Is it's quite stressful just wondering what's going on, not really getting anything back from anybody as such. So yeah, that's it really.
Can I just clarify before I ask further questions?
Yeah.
Do you want us not to run a trial?
No, yes we do.
Yes, we want you to run a trial because there's nobody but residents at the moment.
Okay.
If the trial's not successful,
yeah, you get a better picture then.
Okay,
but
running a trial won't help your problem of needing some resolution within a month.
Oh no, well,
no, unfortunately. Well, ultimately it will, because the trial is not going to be successful because we've only got residents at the moment, which will then convince you guys that it was a harebrained idea, which means that the ferry service will hopefully be abandoned for at least 2, 3, 4 years, and we'll have security of tenure for the next 3, 4 years, as long as you actually run a trial. And
just local.
And so that
That's clarified my answer. It's wonderful. Alexa, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I have some concerns about that. It's an awfully long bow to draw. And I wonder where you might think of a business that's not operating from a publicly owned resource. This is a very similar issue that we have with issues around water use and all sorts of things, is where businesses are created on a publicly owned resource. It becomes problematic as soon as that resource becomes squeezed by demand for it. And I think that's where you're sitting. And I'm not sure, given I was just trying to check quickly the QLDC master plan, and it looks to me that it's pretty clear that that QLDC master plan wants the bay to be community focused and sees it in the long term as a transport hub. So how do you start thinking about that? I can't see anything in the master plan that gives me confidence that the QLDC, even if our trial fails, will give you a longer, or any other commercial tenant of its wharves, a longer lease, because of that simple part in their master plan that even if it doesn't work now, they are seeing in the future that Queenstown Bay infrastructure is going to be needed for community use. It's a really interesting conundrum that we have all over New Zealand, where people are building businesses on public infrastructure or publicly owned asset, be it water, be it wharves, be it anything. And I don't know where that goes. I'm very interested in your views on perhaps looking at that longer term, given that their master plan doesn't seem to be supportive of private business operating from their wharves for a very long time.
Any comment, Wayne and Betty?
Queenstown is a tourism resort and it relies on activities for people to come here. The difference between Kingston and Queenstown is the fact that both are based right beside the lake, but Queenstown has tourism activities. And for the tourism activities, ourselves, the jet boats off the main town pier, the Earnslaw to be moved somewhere else for it to become a transport hub is a somewhat unusual attitude by QLDC.
And people wouldn't come into town, the shops, the businesses wouldn't survive. Like, it's a bigger picture than just that, really.
The master plan of QLDC's master plan does mention the downtown vibrancy, the activity going on and stuff like that. I'm somewhat perplexed that they seem to think that a massive bay like Queenstown Bay should only be as a community resource, when obviously there are thousands of meters available of potential jetty space there, so that both, it's a bit like the roads being dedicated to only the local residents, with no commercial activities being allowed on the roads.
I'm just giving you that from what I was just looking at the plan and wondering, and the Earnslaw is an interesting comparison because that's actually a private wharf, isn't it? Operating on a lakeshore lease, I believe.
Yes, that is correct. As is our jetty, also a private wharf, purchased by QLDC from the original owners. It was Robert Butson from Mount Nicholas.
That's right, and Lapsley, Jim Lapsley. But it's not. But it's no longer a private wharf. It's gone into public ownership, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
Yeah, I think that's where the problem is, and I'm wondering if there is any opportunity to build another wharf somewhere.
Okay, darling, I think that's
sorry. Yeah, it's a bigger discussion.
That.
It's a bigger discussion, but yes. I feel that there needs to be some of that base in it, some of that historical base in the discussion. Okay. Yes, so thank you for intervening. Sorry.
Are there any other questions? Can I thank you both for coming in, and thank you for putting your case so clearly, so succinctly. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, Marion. Thank you.
I'm sorry for my leaping in and out. You'll hear a terrible noise shortly. Right. Our last person, the last person for 2020 submissions is no other than Dougal McGowan from the, look, he must be coming on because the Otago Chamber of Commerce sign is connecting to audio. I've lost you. Dougal, there you are. It completely throws me in these things because you, without moving out of your chair, you move around the room.
Hello.
Hi, Dougal. I'm getting excited because you're moving around my screen at a rapid rate without moving. Okay, Dougal, you are the last person. So you've got all afternoon.
You do not want to go down that track. Seriously.
No, I don't.
I will take that invitation just like that.
Off you go.
Hey, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And I would like to particularly thank Marion for her time during the lockdown period and the time of the CEO, where we spent a bit of time working together through a number of issues and communicating with each other around where we were sitting. So I do really appreciate that. Also do appreciate that it's a big job that you have ahead of you and some really tough decisions. And we know that they're not going to be easy decisions. But they're really important, and they're really important for the region. They're really important for the economic development and recovery that will happen, but also really important for the environment, of which we must protect in the long term. So a very difficult balancing act for you in the coming weeks, as I can imagine. Obviously, you received our submission, pretty open and broad, and really it's about trying to create an environment. We believe that councils should be enablers of some of the economic recovery, and that they have a role to play both locally and regionally, and you have a very special place in that you cover such a variety of a region, from those that have been absolutely devastated during the COVID-19 phase to others which are slightly more, I suppose you could say, will recover quicker than others, I would say, in the coming weeks, based upon the number of people who have been affected. And I suppose with that in mind, you know, there's some things that we believe that could be done to reduce some of the burden that could be placed upon ratepayers. Looking at the balance sheet of council, some of those core and non-strategic assets, what do they look like for you? Reviewing what you are currently budgeting for and making sure that we have all those that are essential, and what services you believe they are, so that we can continue to do so. Equally, we want you to continue to spend. We believe that is going to be a strong part of the recovery. And, you know, particularly, I was just up in Queenstown on Friday, and maybe this is a chance for it to actually get some of the work done that it would never be able to do while they had 12 million people there. And I know that's a really hard thing to do, but we do actually get a chance to do some of that work now if we can combine together to do so. And it's a really good time to be investing in some infrastructure. And we know that there are the shovel-ready projects, and we wish you well for how that goes. And hopefully, you know, we encourage people to continue to support those. I think it's down to a waiting list of 800 now, I think, out of the 3,000. So hopefully we'll hear one or two soon. But, you know, how can we add value to some of those aspects and make sure that our timing is there so we get less business disruption and people disruption as it goes through? And it may mean that we have to reallocate funding to different times and change those timelines, which we've got. But again, we want to be making sure that we're adding value, adding infrastructure, and not diminishing the productivity that we can see around our region at the moment, because productivity at the moment is already considerably constricted with the with some of the disruption that has happened in the last wee while. And I suppose lastly, is I know the team are working really hard on it, but is there a reprioritisation of the existing budgets and the work streams that could happen in there, so that again we can look and say what is the most important things now and into the future, and you know, continue to we encourage you to continue to work strongly with those other partners like ourselves and the other councils to create and make a difference for our communities. So really the rest is sort of there, but happy to take any questions from people if they have them.
Well, I've got a first question up, and then Hilary. And the first question is, Dougal, it's really trying to do a bit of detective work. I said earlier to a lovely friend from Disabled People's Assembly, I just forgotten his name, Chris Ford. I said to him that one of the things that's hit me in this COVID-19 is that people like me on superannuation, though I'm on a bit more than superannuation now, but take me back 2 years and that's all I was on. Superannuation, and somebody else who's on a disabled person's support, they are no worse off. In other words, we've got a new brand of people who are suddenly needing help.
Mm.
Okay. Are you experiencing that? What are you actually seeing? And are you seeing any hope that they will recover? It's only been about 7 days of trading, or 10 days of trading, but got any thoughts?
That's a really good question. So I think everybody started with hope when they were able to open their doors. And I think now you're seeing a lot of pain. You're seeing considerable pain by many, particularly small businesses. They were hoping that you know, the tills were going to start ringing pretty quickly, but I don't think they're going to. So there's another space. So this is wearing my business hat, and I'm not saying that there's other things, but I'm aware, you know, for example, yes, there's been the salary support, which is there, which has been greatly appreciated. But, you know, if we look at electricity and stuff like that, businesses are still paying all of that throughout that whole time that they were closed down, and they have no way of getting any support for, say, that. But yet you've got the government's electricity fund, heating fund, which people have been able to apply for. Businesses can't do that. You've also got the regional, you know, you've got the regional council group that's also set up some support for people who need energy payments. So there's two lots they can go. They've also had an increase in their benefit of $25 a week, which could help that. Businesses have had none of that. They are really hurting with the amount of cost that they have going. And we know, for example, with the Aurora Energy consultation, that their costs are going to go up 87% on their line charges. So these are all costs that are going to have to sit within there. So that's just a minor example of
is rental a problem?
Yeah, for many it is. Yeah, because so as soon as you open the doors, for many they go back to being on full rental. Some landlords have been very, very good and have got a gradual scale as it goes through. But for many, for example, in some of the hospitality, as soon as you open your doors, you're back to full rental of your business premises. Whereas they might have been 50% or 100% off before that if they keep the doors closed. So for some, it's actually better business at the moment to keep the doors closed.
Thank you for that. Kate?
That in part answered my question, thank you. But I just want to check, can you describe what you expect the unemployed workforce in Dunedin to look like, or in other parts? And we've heard a lot from Queenstown, and I understand why that is, because it's a very, very big shock there. But what would you anticipate being the situation, say, in Milton, Balclutha, Oamaru, and what those sectors are looking like?
Yeah, so again, good question. Thank you, Kate. So when you look at, let's say, Oamaru and Balclutha, so during the level 4 of the lockdown, they had over 60% of their workforce were still classified as essential in those areas. And so that means they had more people continuing to work and continuing to be on, for most of those, at 100% of their wages. So the reality is that some of those might be primary sector, health sector, whatever, but they will bounce back a little bit quicker. In Dunedin, you know, we had over 1,000 people in that month register for support, but that's only a minor part of it. That's about the factors. So, for example, if my wife gets laid off from her job, she won't show up on any of those stats because of the demographic that we're in. So you've got this list of people who won't be seen in some statistics, but you've also got those, and we know already that there's a large number of people out there who are first time registering for support, and they don't even know what that really looks like. And you're talking middle managers, senior leaders. You know, I've heard of a rumour today that'll be quite devastating for the city if it is actually true. You know, that this organisation will be shutting down because it's a landmark sort of, I suppose, business in town. And it's these effects, but it's not just the fact that people are losing jobs, it's the fact that most household incomes are down either 20% across the two salaries quite often, and that it can be even more than that. So it's not just the unemployment, it's the underutilization of hours, which is really important. So, you know, some people will be working less hours, but also the income that is coming in within the household.
So I'm going to leap in. There's a question that comes straight up to mind. Oh, sorry, Hilary. So, where are you? Kate, were you following up?
I was going to add to that, sorry.
Go for it, dear.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, just Dougal, that's interesting. Can you give me how do we find out? We've got these opportunities of creating jobs in partnership with a whole lot of other industries, but or government departments, but understanding the skill mix that requires jobs or the availability and what these people look like. Are you doing any work to find out what that skill mix is, or should we be doing some work to find that skill mix? Because it's very hard to match jobs with if we don't know what the people are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's there was already been quite a considerable amount of work, and it was mainly focused around the hospital rebuild, but it ended up only being part of what the mix was. So we know that over the next, I think it was 10 years, or this was back in March, so pre-COVID, that there was approximately $16 billion worth of construction activity to happen in the Otago region, and that was only for activity over $20 million. So anything less than $20 million wasn't included in that. And that included both vertical and horizontal infrastructure. We know that there are considerable amounts of other work, like for example, there are 4 schools that are needing rebuilding and those sorts of things, and they all sit under $20 million. So there's still quite a bit there. So we know that there's going to be quite a bit of opportunity for retraining of people, and we've been submitting really hard to government about people who are made redundant if they go straight back into training or retraining, that they should continue to receive that salary subsidy, so that during the time, and get free fees, so that they don't get into that malaise of being at home. And we know that the community and the health issues that can be resulting from that. So we don't know yet, but we know MSD is working really hard on that, and we're connected with them and the Polytech, so that we can use some of the EduBits and the I Am Capable platform to be able to recognise prior learning, because some of these people may not have got into, let's say, formal education for a long period of time, but they have been doing stuff within their workplace that we need to formally recognise.
Thank you. You answered my question. Hilary.
Listening to what you're proposing today, it seems to me, if I can rudely put it, you've got to bob both ways, or if I could put it a different way, whatever we choose to do, somebody is going to be able to say, the Otago Chamber of Commerce suggested we do this. Whatever we choose at this point, that will be the answer. So if we intend to spend more money, we'll have your support because you've said to spend more money. If we intend to spend it in all sorts of ways, we're going to say, well, that was good quality spending, because each of us thinks whatever we're proposing to spend money on is good quality spending. So there's nothing that we could do that you wouldn't be supporting by the look of it. So what I would like to know is what actually of the choices we've got, you would be encouraging and discouraging, if you like, because saying sort of go and spend some money, it's a good time, and quality spending's good and things doesn't give us it. You know, I gather borrowing instead of a rates increase might be in there, but if you could just tell me a couple of things that would be things you would support, or one that you wouldn't support, so as we won't be saying you just support anything we choose to do.
So to be clear, what we're saying is to look at all of those expenditure lines and to then reprioritise them according to what they may be. I haven't necessarily said you should spend more. What we're saying is to tactily to be able to go and spend it in the right places so that it adds that value, or it might bring those things forward. It may mean that it might be actually better for you to borrow money at 1.6% than the interest rate that you're currently getting of 7.9 on all your investments. I don't know what your investment portfolio is returning, you guys do, but it might be actually better to borrow it to be able to tactically be able to use that. You have those books there. What we would say though is it shouldn't further disrupt what is already happening in the business sector, because there's enough disruption already there, and to make sure that you've got the priorities which are going to be able to mean that you're creating a platform for the recovery to launch from, right? So that once that recovery gets into its full run, that we're not then disrupting that recovery by, I don't know, digging up holes in roads or something like that in the middle of times when we've got 12 million tourist boats here, I don't know, so that we're actually tactically using this time to be able to get some of that stuff done that isn't going to cause the disruption.
And that's actually, sorry, because I've been tangling with matching the skill set of those facing unemployment with the jobs that people are offering to us out there. But then there's this added thing of doing things in a time when aren't so many people using the road or whatever it is that we're attempting to do.
And I think we've got to be really careful to think that that people who are of a different nationality working in a restaurant are actually, from a health and safety perspective, in the best place to be clearing wilding pines up a mountain.
Or shooting rabbits in the dark.
Well, you know, so we've got to be sensible about what we are really expecting these people to be able to do. But there are some things, you know, whether there's some Three Waters work, whether there's some irrigation work, where we know long term it's going to add value to the region and the economy, then there may be some aspects here that can be looked into.
One of the things that's appealed to me is rejigging the houses in Milton, where there's a very bad air quality issue. This might be a good time to actually do some work there. And that is different skills again from being 5,000 feet up a mountain.
Yeah, and you know, I've had somebody suggest to me as well is that, you know, this could be the time, and I don't know anywhere near enough about it, but you know, solar panels, give everybody solar panels, and we might have a time to be able to adjust it for the $5,000 that it goes out. But I don't know the details behind that, and I'm not ever going to profess that I'm an expert, but it might be that time that there can be that tactical change made.
Are there any questions? Any further questions? Looking across and down the list. They're not. Are there further things you want to say to us? Would you like to sort of wish us the best, because this is going to be one hell of a job?
Oh, as they quite often say, this is why you get paid the big bucks, I suppose. They are difficult decisions in difficult times. You know, but you know, I suppose what I'm saying is that we're here to help and support if we can. You know, we really want to be part of those discussions as we have been in the past. And we wish you well in your decision making, because we know it's not easy during a time like this. You know, it's a tough time throughout the region, and we have got probably one of the most diverse regions, where you've got the total calamity which is happening in Queenstown, through to what can be some strength in other areas. But you know, some work around that, you know, our very strong primary sector has really done us pretty strongly in the next wee while. You know, then you get the news today, of course, where the port is going to be one ship less, 15,000 containers. You know, that's quite a hit to your baseline, but also to the regions.
I think we want to wish you the best, don't we? We want to wish the Chamber of Commerce the best.
Yeah.
We all rely on them.
You know, it's not, let's be honest, our business model at the moment is probably one of those ones that you'd say is slightly flawed when it's about membership events and training. There's not a lot of any of that going on at the moment, but we're really, my team have been amazing. You know, they've supported over 400 businesses with vouchers. They've also, you know, we've called about 500 businesses throughout the region, and we've gone and visited them. And, you know, if you do get a chance, that phone a friend in business, just get on the phone and give one person a day a ring and just ask them how they are, because it's pretty tough out there for many of them. And if you haven't done it, just do one a day, and I can tell you it'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Dougal, so much. And please don't hesitate to pick up the phone, because it's really useful. You're holding an awful lot of knowledge of what's happening in our community. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate your time, and good luck with your deliberations. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, people, as I understand it, we have come to the end. All right. We've got a changed timetable for Wednesday and